Steve? Great. Going back. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018 Tiverton Budget Committee meeting. If we could stand and pledge allegiance to the flag over to our right. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mr. Paul. Present. Ms. Jocelyn. Present. Mr. Janet. Present. Mr. Leonard. Present. Myself present. Mr. McNally.
Present.
Mr. Edwards.
Present.
Ms. Hollenbach. Present. Mr. Katz.
Present.
Ms. Rauschley. Present. And we're missing Mr. Cody.
Okay. Okay, members of the public. All right. We move on. What I'd like to do is here we go. We have Attorney Squishy right in time.
Do you want to sit on the end, Peter, over there? Sure. It's an open seat right now. Welcome to our library in the high school.
And we just called a meeting to order, and you're first on the agenda. All right, do you still have the planning board meeting to hit?
I do, yeah.
Great.
Second, so hopefully we'll be through that first part by then.
When?
So I believe the first item on the agenda.
Turn the microphone on. I'm sorry.
Thank you. We're on the discussion of potential Tiverton Casino gaming revenue.
That's correct.
In relation to the Budget Committee budget and tax levy. So I had forwarded to the chair a memo that was drafted by Tony DeSisto, the solicitor's office, stated October 17th, 2017. I don't know if has the rest.
It has been
committee?
circulated. Yep.
Okay. So essentially, you looked at the section of the charter 301B1, which sets out the criteria for what the Budget Committee will submit to the public as part of the FDR process. And the question had come up, if in that process is the Budget Committee going to set how the casino revenue is going to be spent in the upcoming budget year. So his analysis looked at 301B1C, and that tasks the Budget Committee with setting the amount to be raised by taxation, and in setting including maximum dollar amounts for motor vehicle, real and tangible property, and resulting total property tax levies. And he also looked at the nature of the gaming revenue. Now there are certain revenue that's going to be generated from the casino that's going to be taxes, so that's property tax and those sorts of revenue generation for the town. That will be allocated by the Budget Committee pursuant to your mandate under the charter. The gaming revenue, however, is non-tax revenue. Now, the charter does provide for the council and the administrator to come up with a revenue estimate of from revenues other than taxes and send it to the Budget Committee. So that's not saying you can't look at those things, and of course you can and should look at those things. But in setting your proposal to the FDR, you can't restrict what the gaming revenue will be spent on. Instead, by charter, and that's section 1214, the gaming revenue would be sent to miscellaneous sources of revenue, which is deposited in the general funds, and once there, the council could either by ordinance, or if there was a charter change that was to restrict how those funds could be are to be allocated, those funds could be restricted in that manner, but it's not something that could be restricted and set pursuant to the FTR. So, are there any questions about that? I'd be happy to answer any.
One of our first questions was that there are other sources of revenue that aren't tax revenue, and namely the police and fire detail. And can you comment on the difference between considering gaming revenue versus the fire and police revenue that is also affiliated would rise because of the details that would be needed for the casino?
I think it would fall into the same category of non-tax revenue. So certainly, ultimately what you set to the voters at the FDR will include this is what your taxes are going to be set at, and you can consider a number of things when you make that determination. And as part of your budget, you can say, we're going to allocate so many taxes to, one line item and so much to another line item. And when you make that determination with regard to the tax revenue, that's binding. But you can account for non-tax revenue. But ultimately, it's left to another, and under the current charter, it would be up to the council to decide how that revenue is allocated. Ultimately.
Last year, we passed a resolution, and it was approved at the FTR to allocate the money that was realized from the sale of the Essex Library to be used for the library debt. But that wasn't taxes. So how were we able to do that? Or why were we able to do that?
Oh, you know what? I can't. Okay.
Can you hear him, Steve? Great.
So that was with the sale of the Essex Library, and the resolution was passed that would require the sale of the library to be used for certain purposes. And to be honest, I recall what you're mentioning. I don't remember what those purposes were, but I think that where that resolution came in was that under the charter, for the disposition of town property, you're required to get FTR approval, and that was the mechanism where that restriction was.
Actually, that resolution was a petitioner's resolution. Mrs. Donna Cook put it on the ballot and prescribed that any proceeds from the sale of the Essex Library would go to pay the library bond debt.
Right. Now that that's refreshing my memory on that. But I think that the FTR has, I guess you could say, it's specifically given jurisdiction over approving the sale of or disposing of town property. And I believe there's a charter provision that says any disposition that would cause town property to go out of town hands for a lease greater than 10 years specifically needs FTR approval. So the condition of that FTR approval was to say the proceeds will be allocated in manner X, Y, Z. So that, I think that's the provision that allowed that particular resolution to go forward.
You just said that a minute ago that we can account for non-tax revenue. What do you mean by account for?
So, ultimately, you're setting a tax rate. You're saying, here are the line items that we're going to pay for with taxes. If you were to, let's just use for an example, if the budget committee was to determine we want to have X amount in our general fund as a cushion. That's something that was important. You could account for that by saying, well, we're going to have this money coming in from the casino, so we can't, the council's going to be able to have that to be able to use in that manner, so we're going to set the tax rate at X rather than setting it at Y or Z. So
I'm not seeing a distinction here. So we set a total budget allowable spending.
Mm-hmm.
We can account for the casino money as we set the tax rate based on that spending. And all you're really saying is that at the end of the day, when the FTR is all said and done, the council can choose to use its money however it wants. It can't change the tax rate, but if it says, no, we're not going to use the casino money for this purpose, we're going to use it for this purpose, and we'll use tax revenue for that purpose, the council can move stuff around, but we can still set the line items, the spending, and the tax rate based on the premise of an assumed amount of casino revenue.
Oh, you can make that assumption, yes. But at the end of the day, the council has the control over it. And in fact, if the council were to pass, or let's say if the council, just as an example, or if a charter amendment was to be passed to say, this is the manner that the casino revenue shall be allocated, and we're going to put it in a restricted account for whatever the case may be, capital improvements or something along those lines. If the council passed that ordinance and it was restricted in that manner, then that would be a restriction on the use of those funds.
But then it would be up to the council to come up with, if there's then say $1 million gap in the budget, they'd have to come up with how they're going to account for that.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that happened with the trash line item. So the council, there was a budget that was voted on and set by the FTR, and then it was up to the council to determine, how they were going to make that work. So
my question is couldn't they do that with any of the other revenue streams? Like, why is it just casino? Like, if they wanted to allocate, okay, the police came in way high, the police details came in way higher than what was given to us here, why couldn't they, just the same as casino money, make an ordinance and direct that money, because we are now generating more money than that was projected?
Barring any other provision of the general laws, because I haven't looked into those specific, research that, but the council does have the authority to allocate non-tax revenue through an ordinance. I think that the casino revenue is just unique because the gaming revenue is unique because of the amount that they're expecting to receive from that one source of non-tax revenue.
So I guess the problem I'm having with that too is, as we're sitting looking at the assessor's statement, they deduct the revenue that they're predicting, but they know this other revenue stream is coming in. So I'm still not following why that particular item needs to be excluded. We know that the town's going to generate some dollar amount. Why wouldn't it be, if they're going to count this revenue, why wouldn't you count that revenue? I mean, there's so many other non-tax revenue items here. It's either deduct all of them, or why is this one only the one getting an exception?
If I could jump in, I think the way I understood what you just said to me was that we can handle the casino money exactly in the same fashion. Basically, this has been, let's say, moderated to say that the town council can then do whatever it actually wants to do with the money. Mm-hmm. But as far as we're concerned, and I think this has always been my understanding of our role, is we put the suggested budget on the ballot. There's a resolution that says that our line items are the starting point, but then the council can move things around in the course of its own duties. And that sounds like it's no different with the casino money than with anything else.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. I would say that statement's correct. But there is the distinction between tax revenue and non-tax revenue. That, whereas in the one, you have the authority to allocate according to the budget the budget that's voted on by the FTR, that you present to the FTR. The other, you are looking at it, you're getting an estimate of what it will be, but it's not restricted through this process.
No, under restriction, I do want to ask, I'm curious, so you say that the town council can decide that it wants to allocate or restrict the casino money through some ordinance or something. How does that get around, A, that section 1214 of the charter says that miscellaneous revenue has to go into the general funds, which means as opposed to special funds, which are restricted, and section 203, which says that any major appropriations over $500,000 require a referendum.
So I think in that 203, appropriations refers to revenue generated by taxes. Or am I? Well, let me pull up the charter so I can look at what you're referring to. I'll pull up. I have my computer.
Well, in this first year anyway, it's unlikely that there would be casino revenue that would be more than $500,000. Well, not all at once. Like as it arrives, it would not come in over 500,000.
Well, that would be another, I mean, that would come to interpreting how you account for $500,000. If you say over the course of the year we're going to have $1 million revenue, we're going to do this with it, I don't think you get around the charter requirement by saying, but it's going to come in installments, so it's not really over $500,000. I mean, I wouldn't expect that to be.
So,
or in your plan, if you expect to get over the course of 10 years $1 million, and you say we're going to put this $1 million to that, I would say you would trigger this requirement for a special vote.
Justin, can I ask you about section 203? So, unless I'm in the wrong section, 203, it says borrowing up to in excess of $500,000. I don't see in the paragraph, or issuance of bonds, I don't see anything about revenue in that
No, it
paragraph.
says any major or special appropriation other than those which are part of an annual budget for an amount in excess of $500,000, and any proposal for borrowing money. So special appropriations and borrowing. They're separate.
yeah, I would, I don't think this section 203 would apply to requiring a vote from other revenue sources. So just to, put out a hypothetical, some rich person could make a bequest to the town of $1 million. That doesn't require a vote. What requires a vote is either if you put the town into debt by bonding or otherwise getting the town into debt, or if you're appropriating the money from the taxpayers. And this refers to a major or special appropriation other than the annual budget. So that's occasionally if you have some type of big fiscal crisis in the town, you can have a special a tax levy that's not during the ordinary process of the budget cycle. And there's statutes that allow that. But I think this charter provision that says if you are going to use that mechanism and it's in excess of 500,000, this provision controls how you
It says
get that.
any major or special appropriation, period, wherever the revenue is coming from.
Well, I don't think that you're not really appropriating the money if it's just a revenue that you're receiving.
Well, appropriating, I looked it up last night in Black's Law Dictionary, it's claiming. So you're appropriating. I'm claiming this money for this purpose. It doesn't much matter whether it's tax dollars or where the money's coming from. I mean, I would.
Okay. So I guess in your reading, if it was a donation, like someone just was giving $5,001 to the town, that would require a vote?
No, well, I mean, it would just go into general fund. But to claim it for a purpose. So if the casino, for example, if the casino money just comes into the town's coffers and little by little it's spent just as we go about our business, that probably wouldn't trigger a vote. But if the town council says, we declare that this money will go to this purpose, then you're appropriating that full sum of money to a purpose, which would trigger the requirement of a vote. That would be my reading of it. In particular, in combination with Section 1214, which says that miscellaneous funds have to go into the general fund, which means not restricted.
Now, I think the other the other portion of that refers to the general fund, and that's the last section, section 3. And I think that kind of gets to your point of what can be spent out of the general fund. Section 310, the unreserved general fund. It says no money shall be taken, withdrawn, or obligated from the unreserved general fund if such withdrawal would cause said fund to fall below 3% of the current operating budget. This restriction may be suspended on a case-by-case basis on an affirmative vote of the town council in order to address a declared state of emergency. So reading that section, it tells me two things. One, any removing funds from the general fund that does not take it below the 3% is allowed. If it has to go below the 3%, then you need to do the declaration of emergency. The other thing that I think this provision implies is that the appropriate body for deciding whether to take funds from the general fund is the town council. So, general revenue can be placed into the general fund. I don't think that means it has to stay there. With regard to the other provision, my interpretation would be, when talking about a special appropriation, that's talking about a special tax levy. But
Can I ask, you're talking about miscellaneous revenue. How do you prove that casino revenue is categorized into miscellaneous revenue? We also have a line item here for miscellaneous income, 4999. So it's in our revenue sheet. So how can you prove that casino money falls into that? I've heard from other people in the state that it isn't any different. It isn't just in some odd category that can't be looked at as town revenue.
So if you're referring to section 1214, we were referring it in shorthand as miscellaneous revenue. The actual section refers to all fees, penalties, payments, and miscellaneous sources of revenue. So basically that says, including the vending machine, copy machines, et cetera, et cetera. I would read that to be basically a catch-all that says any revenue that's coming to the town, other than taxes, shall be transmitted to the town treasury to be deposited in the general funds of the town.
I think there's copy machine is on in a separate line item in here somewhere. Copy machine 4760. Miscellaneous revenue assessors 4999. They each have a miscellaneous revenue for all the different groups.
Ruth,
Yeah.
Ruth.
So
Denise was quite clear with us that casino would have its own line item. It would not go into miscellaneous.
but I'm not going by Denise. She's not the legal source, so I'm asking. So.
But he's not an accountant either.
She's the town accountant.
I think this sheet here is, it's really not, the labeling on this is more about accounting for it. So I think here they'd say miscellaneous revenue clerk just to say revenue that's expected, but maybe each individual source is not large enough to merit its own line item to account for. But section 1214, I don't think it's being used in that manner. I think it's being used just as a catch-all to refer to, all types of revenue that, other than taxes, the town receives: fees, penalties, payments, and miscellaneous other sources. So.
I just don't understand. I don't see anything on here, and our precedent was set when we used all these different types of revenue over the years that any other type of revenue should go on here. That's the precedent that's been set. No one has ever said that it's some odd category that is its own category. There's nothing that's called casino revenue in accounting.
Well, my question is there any other revenue stream that we're not counting right now with the exception of casino money? So again, why does this particular item become a special thing? We know it's going to come in this fiscal year. They're accounting for every other revenue stream unless there's revenue that isn't on here that they're accounting for.
Yeah,
so why would this be excluded from this fiscal year? If it's paid in this fiscal year and we're going to be true to an FDR, and they're going to account for every other cent that comes into the town, why does this become under a special provision?
So it sounds like that's a question about how you want to have information presented to you. And, that's not really a legal question, I don't think.
But it's also not a question for him as a lawyer. It's a question to the town council to say, there are estimates of revenue, and we're missing these.
Right, but
No, they haven't.
But earlier, he's already said we can change that around. We can add that line item. Ultimately, we can't stop the council, right? Right. So we set the amount of spending, the total. They can probably go over that in some ways, and we set the tax, which is basically what we set as the tax is it. Otherwise, they have to do a special referendum to have a supplementary tax bill. And we, in coming up with that tax from that spending, we can say we expect this from the casino, and that's that. And if the council disagrees, they have to work within the budget to make it work. However, they do that, but that's on them. So I don't see any restraint from what I'm hearing on casino money that's different from any of the other revenue that we look at.
Well, I think that the ultimate question comes down to what you think is a good budgeting practice, because the charter gives you discretion to decide, here's what we think the tax rate is going to be. That's your, it's your duty. It's your, and you have the privilege of doing that and presenting that to the FTR. So if you do that and you say, here's where we're going to set it at, and if it's voted on and approved, that will become the tax rate.
In addition, they ran the casino ads and all the information prior to the vote that it would help tax rates in town. And even the casino people did that. It was on their flyers. Yes, it was. The casino and other people. Yes, it was in it. It was there too. I can show you.
The bottom line is, we have to figure out what dollar amount would be appropriate to add to this, but we know this revenue is coming, so why would you exclude it and go, okay, put it in the savings account for this year, and then next year we'll figure out what we're going to do with it?
Right. But there's a couple of things, though. Is that what I'd like is to make sure, for the time that we have, Peter, is to make sure that legal questions that we think interpreting the charter or what might be within. All right. One question that I have would be: is there a possibility that resolutions or charter changes could supersede what we vote on?
So, with respect to how the casino revenue was allocated, is that the question?
Correct. It could be, or it could be something that is restricting how funds above the 3% are used in the general fund. I'm not sure how much of a distinction. One concern would be is that we make our best judgment on gaming revenue, and it helps us determine a tax rate, and that starts July 1st. And the conclusion of a full review of the charter, and then changes that come to the town council and then voted on. Can there, within the fiscal year that we set a budget, can they come out and say, no, that money needs to be put to different purposes?
Can I tag on to that?
So I'd say the main answer would be yes.
They can do that.
Now there are
it can be done, not
there are
they.
a couple of caveats to that. The first being any provision in the charter would have to be consistent with general laws. And other law, constitutional law, that type of thing. So if there was a charter proposal that was presented that would say restrict casino revenue, if it did it in a way that violated some pre-existing statute or constitutional provision, then it wouldn't take effect. But assuming that the charter provisions are consistent with the general laws and the state constitution, and it's enacted, then and it says, for an example, casino revenue shall be allocated to a particular purpose. If it's a lawful purpose, that would govern. The other caveat would be, now generally, charter provision becomes effective the date it's enacted, and that's what happens unless there's another statement in the charter amendment that says we want this to become effective on, it could be outside the fiscal year, to account for these type of budgeting concerns. If that's what ends up being proposed, then that would push out the effective date. But ultimately, if given the hypothetical that a charter amendment is proposed that would affect budgeting, it's legal, and it's enacted within the fiscal year, to take effect within the fiscal year, then it would take effect. And
Mr. Chairman, if I may, But the charter, any provision that the Charter Review Commission is going to propose is only going to be voted on in November. So let's say, just to keep it simple, we said we're going to allocate $1 million of casino gaming revenue to the revenue side. And then the Charter Review Commission had a provision that said we're going to take 100%, to keep it simple, keep 100% of the casino gaming revenue, and that's all going to go to fund paving. Now, how would that operate when that vote wouldn't take place until November? So we would be well into the fiscal year.
So I think in that scenario, it would be prudent to phrase the charter amendment to say beginning in the next fiscal year. If they didn't, though, then whatever. So the first point is that prior to November 1st, you may consider that it could be used for a certain purpose, but the council ultimately would decide to want to put someplace else. After November 1st, if it changed if it restricted where the casino revenue would go, then whatever the remaining casino revenue that was received after November, is it November 1st or the first Tuesday in November? Then if that charter provision took effect on the vote, then from that point on, the revenue would need to be directed in accordance with the charter.
But only revenue that came in after that November date. So if you got paid in October and that money has already gone into the general fund, they can't, even though it was generated from casino revenue, they can't retro it back. So it's already in the general fund and it's been...
Yeah, I think there's 2 points to that. The first is that any legislative enactment, which the charter amendments would be, they're presumed to be only prospective and not retrospective, unless it explicitly says that we're going back. The other part is, if it's something that's already been spent, it's already, the town doesn't have it anymore, obviously you can't change that. But they could put something in there that says, any casino revenue that's received after November 4th, and then explicitly put a caveat that says, and any remaining casino revenue that the town has received that hasn't been expended shall be used for whatever purpose it may be, as long as it's a legal purpose. And there are certain things that they could tell the town to that you need to spend it on this, and it may not be a legal way to spend it. So that's the one caveat.
It's unlikely that we would have any casino revenue before November. That if the casino opened in September, the first payment then would be December. So the only casino-related revenue would be from the police and fire detail, right?
Okay. So, and that's I guess that would the tax revenue. Right now, by charter, you set that with the FTR. And if they were to alter the way the tax revenue as opposed to the gaming revenue is to be allocated, that would require some fundamental changes to the charter. I don't know if that's the road they're going down, but I think it's worth keeping those two distinguished, because the tax revenue, if you say we're going to raise this tax revenue and use it for X, Y, Z, you have the authority under the charter to say, that's where it goes.
So, I guess what I'm coming away from this whole discussion we're having here is we can visualize gaming income, but we cannot define where it will go. It has to go to the general fund.
That's correct.
As things are now, unless there's a charter change.
That's correct.
All right. The charter review is sitting right now, and my understanding of that whole process is they recommend to the town council, and the town council decides which one of those items actually get voted on.
That's correct. I know there's been
I'm
disagreement
not
about
saying
that
the
that's
council
our
is a bunch
position,
of bad guys, but
Yep.
this is the perception that you'll get in the town. They decide what to vote on. They decide we're not going to decide what to do with the casino money, so we stay in control of it. And we go merrily on our way as we are now. is there any way to get around that?
No, that's established by the Rhode Island Constitution, which it sets out the manner in which home rule charter communities amend the charter. And there was actually a Rhode Island Supreme Court case on that. And in the constitutional provision that says how a charter is amended, it said it will be done by vote of the legislative body. And in that case, I believe it was a Middletown case. I think it was Middletown, Viveros versus Middletown. But essentially, there were some electors in the town that wanted to redo the initial charter process. So the initial way to adopt a home rule charter is to pass around a petition, if there's so many signers, and send it to a vote, and that sort of thing. And they wanted to use that mechanism to basically throw out the old charter, bring in the new charter. What the Rhode Island Supreme Court said was, once you amend your initial home rule charter, the only way to, once you enact your initial home rule charter, the only way to amend it is by vote of the legislative body of the town. And that's in the Constitution. So,
Peter, can I ask a question too?
yes.
In following charter review a lot, there's been a lot of conversation that this may go to litigation because the town council and the charter review can't agree as to a process. If it goes to litigation, it may not even be on the November ballot. Is that correct?
Well, I don't think that would stop the November ballot from going forward.
No, not the November ballot.
The charter.
Yeah, if they're in litigation over it.
I would say that, and again, this is just my analysis, and I'm sure there are other people that would disagree, and they have their reasons for disagreeing. I'm not saying they're, but my analysis would be that, one, I think the case law is pretty clear on the point. The other point is that I think that courts, when they're dealing with issues that have to do with elections, they deal with them quicker than they would with other issues. And also, I don't think that the Charter Commission would, as a commission, would have the ability to sue the town, since they're a part of the town, they're a body of the town. But that being said, that there may be some litigation that results. If it does, we just try to expedite that as quickly as possible to resolve that question.
Going back to the budget asked questions, I think it behooves us to be clear. What basically the line items we set are not restricted. They're just, it's sort of an accounting. This is where you start, and from here on, the council will have to justify what it does to change it, but that's on them to justify that. The exception is that resolutions can restrict line items, which we've done often. So that's the opportunity for the FTR to say this money will go to paving or the elections account or whatever. We're not doing that in our budget. That has to be a resolution. If there were to be a charter change that said, starting right now, all this money has to go to this, to home improvements at Justin's house or something like that, then
Can we do that?
if you want to, I wouldn't. I could think of the money to use this. No, but if the charter does that, then it's going to be on the council to come up with the money, because we've already set the tax rate, based on that money going to whatever, if we were to do that. So that would become, then at that point, the whole question becomes political, and whoever's going to put on that charter suggestion to use that money immediately would face opposition from people who would say correctly, this will force a special tax increase in the middle of the year. So it's unlikely that they would do that. They'd probably do sort of like the way the state government has gotten out of giving us our minimum amount of casino revenue in the first year is by saying in the first full year you get your. So that would be probably what a charter change would advisably do to get past the voters, is in the first full year of casino revenue, this will go to paving or repairs at Justin's house or whatever.
Can I just ask a question too? With our current resolutions for we're going to put everything that's over in or 25% of what's over in the general fund. If we don't account for this money in revenue, all that money that comes in is going to end up in the general fund, and then end up with a really big paving account. Is that a correct analogy? What was the resolution? How much of the percentage?
I think that, isn't that DPW money?
Correct.
Right, but our resolution was, at the end of the year, you take whatever's over, wasn't it everything over the 3%, 25%? So if you don't account for this revenue, wouldn't it?
It's not revenue, though.
No.
It's just-
Denise told us that was only like $5,000.
The resolution.
Last year.
Unexpended. So if this money isn't counted for, and it is unexpended, though.
No, but it's
Oh, okay.
It's not revenue.
Okay, so I'm wrong. All right, I'm wrong.
Could I,
I asked that last.
what I'd like, again, we can, plenty of discussion to continue, but I want to make sure that with a solicitor here, if there are legal questions, that we make sure we get the benefit of this, because we won't have another shot at it.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
Hold on. Ruth, would you mind?
Can you give the legal precedent that casino funds are in some special category that is not in other categories that are, all these other categories that are not all tax?
So our interpretation was based on the language in the charter and statute that it's a non-tax revenue. That's what it's based on. So, the definition of a tax would be, you get a tax bill every year, you got to pay it. If you don't pay it, there's some penalty involved. That's all set out in the statutory scheme, Title 44 of the general laws.
Every
So that's
one of these departments has miscellaneous revenue. It can be, I don't understand where that's coming from the charter.
No, where we are right now
Mhm.
is that the casino money is exactly like all that other stuff. It's just all of it's handled by Section 1214 of the charter, which is fines, fees, income, other miscellaneous. So it's not separate from those. It is not manifestly not tax revenue, but it's just the same as all the non-tax revenue.
Okay. A question I have in terms of, I think you've answered this, so it's asking in a different way, but so your opinion would be is that the budget committee can't dictate how these funds that get gaming revenue would be used, that would go into the general fund, and that a resolution by us to say these funds will be used for this purpose is not legal, wouldn't be in accordance.
That's
correct.
Yep.
And therefore a petitioner couldn't do either.
That's correct.
Could the town council?
Do a resolution to the FDR?
Correct.
I don't think that would be the appropriate mechanism for using that. They could do it by ordinance, perhaps, to set out here's how this revenue is going to be allocated. But I don't think, because I think the ultimate authority would be at the councils. So any authority that they to determine how that would be used would be theirs to decide one way or the other.
Okay.
So was I correct when I said the charter review submits suggestions to the town council, and then the town council plucks the ones they want to get presented to the voters for the budget review approval
For the charter
or
approval?
charter review?
That's correct.
All right. So
but-
then, if they choose to leave out anything that even has a hint of casino on it, the voters will never get a chance to talk to vote on this.
So there'll be a public
They can
hearing.
do this.
There'll be a public hearing at the town council, but ultimately, yes, they'll have the choice to send the charter amendments they want to send and the ones they don't
So
want
at
to send.
that
will
point,
come from the ballot.
the only recourse the voters would have would be to not approve the presented charter.
And then vote the entire council out for
Yeah, and that takes 4 years,
Oh, no.
or 2 years. Oh, well, but is that pretty much a true scenario?
Yeah, so,
So
I mean,
they
I won't get
could-
into I won't get into the politics of it, but I think the process would be the charter commission gives proposals. There's a public hearing held in front of the council. The council will vote on which proposals that they would like to send to the voters, and the ones that are approved by the voters become part of the charter.
But for this purpose, we can. There's nothing excluding us from getting back to the
Question?
casino revenue.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's nothing excluding us from counting it as the revenue. We just can't tell them how to spend it.
Right, and essentially what you're doing with any non-tax revenue is you're accounting for here's what's expected, and therefore, based on what we're expecting, we're going to set our tax rate at this, and what you think is good budgeting policy to have, to make sure you have enough overage for unexpected events, that's your discretion to decide. We want to set the tax rate at X amount. You get to choose what you want to propose to the FTR.
And as long as we don't put any restrictions as to how they're spending it, it's still accountable. They can still account it.
Yes.
Peter, a question in your opinion, if a source of revenue was not realized, would that constitute an emergency for the town council?
Could be, depending on the size of the revenue and what they need it for. It could be. You mean in order to go under the 3% of the general fund?
Correct.
Depending on the circumstances, it could be, yes.
Okay.
And depending how big it is, I think Justin correctly alluded that it could cause a special tax levy.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That money would get utilized for any catch fall of something that didn't come in, anything that's over the 3%, correct?
They could use it for that. That's anything above the 3%, the council has discretion on how to use it without voting emergency. Anything below the 3%, they need to vote by the 4/5.
And they would have to use that money first, correct?
Above the 3%?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would have to be the case.
Yeah, and then we can recommend in our revenue side that we take anything over the 3% to count as revenue. Yeah, which the budget committee has done going back forever, financial town meetings, etc.
Okay. With that, final shot. I thank you, Peter.
Actually, I'm not advising the board on the first agenda item, so I don't think I'll be too late.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
I'd like to, if we could, I know we're on discussing the gaming revenue, and there's still more to be talked about, is to move to the next item, and we can come back to item 2 if we would, but Dave Roberts has an update for us, and I'd like to have the benefit of his input.
Yeah. I make a motion to move up number 3, updates by the town tax assessor, David Robert.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous. Great, thanks. Welcome back.
Really simple. I distribute the updated levy worksheet, what I call updated with new valuation. So with the initial document that I provided, we're guesstimating at that point in time roughly a 10% increase in valuations townwide. As I explained, I'm usually very cautious and conservative on that estimate. So as everything has been in and out, and through the hearing process, some other bumps that we had to go through in my office, we finally were able to tally a more assured number that the new valuation is going to come out to roughly 2.235 million versus the prior number, which I'm sorry, I don't have the prior.
It was a 2181.
So we have 2235. The net result is the former tax rate that was estimated was at 1713. So we're at this point 1674. And again, I'm keeping the red notation there that we're still estimating. Only for the fact that the revaluation company is still conducting the hearings, they still may make some changes, and we are still applying personal exemptions to the new account, so that number is going to change very slightly. But for the rest of your purposes and what's going to be published in the public notice that has to go to take with down to the and you will be utilizing the $2.225 billion number, and depending on your final budget number, that tax rate is going to change.
Hi, Dave, question for me would be, do you know offhand the municipal budget went up about 48,000 from the previous?
49.
49.
That was what we...
Was that for the 2 trucks? Okay, so that would account for the difference.
Right.
Thank you.
And I had, Dave had asked me today where we were in terms of the final numbers, so these numbers we need to double check, but were ones that we voted on in terms of the expense side of things for the municipal budget. The school budget we've been at, there hasn't been a change. And then I believe it was the last meeting or the meeting before when we look down, when we, the revenue estimate was the 12,875. And of course, we still, that's where our adjustments may be if we make some assumptions about gaming revenue. But all these other things are based on pretty current information that I gave to Dave. So one question that I have, and I'm not sure, is when I looked at last year's FTR, on the 3rd page, it's a summation of what the total budget for the town is, which includes municipal and the schools. It has the calling it receipts, which is revenue. And there's a line item that says plus allowance for uncollected taxes. Yes, thanks, Dave. And just wanting to make sure, so last year there was an assumption of $20,000, and I want to make sure that uncollected taxes or abatements, if they're the same, then fine. If they're different, is just to make sure that we account for things properly.
Right. So that number is basically the same, what I call abatements. So that was the abatement number that I provided last year.
The 20,000, great.
20,000.
Okay.
This year, it's 75,000. Generally, the year immediately of the revaluation, you're going to have higher number of abatements.
Yep.
So as you go from year 1, year 2, and year 3 out from the reval, your corrections are made up front. So the 2nd and 3rd year, your abatement number should be much lower.
Fair enough. Great. The other question I have is last year, and I don't know if this is practice that happens every year, is there's some pros, a couple lines that would say if your house is worth, and in last year's there was the 260,000, which was the median house price. Is that correct, or is that a number that, as we try to finalize this, we should use, or is there a different number?
I would probably use a different number, which would be, I think last year, instead of using median, I probably just used an average of what the average assessed home was in Tiverton. So with this revaluation, there will be an updated number. I don't have that with me, but I can come back to you in a moment.
Okay. And I guess the question would be is that this page that's finalized in the FTR, is that something that the budget committee is providing, or are we just providing the numbers? I mean, I don't know if that's a question. If Denise or Cecil and Deb, last year when we finalized budgets in other years, are we providing this sheet and it's what we say, or is it the inputs for the sheet that the town clerk finalizes?
No, we say. The budget committee says.
Okay. So then, what I would ask then is if you could get to me the that average assessment, so we can do, because to me this is something that's really helpful for people to get some sense of what their taxes are going to be, so they can compare to 1 year prior. Any other questions for these?
Excuse me, I didn't mean to step on your line. In reality, we can plug any household value we want in there and use it as an example. We just don't need to label it as an average. We could say, for example, a house worth XYZ, the tax would be da-da, and forget about whether it's a median or an average, and not get to that level.
For demonstrative purposes, you
Yeah.
can 300,000, 275.
Yeah.
I mean, at least you're just showing what an impact of that certain house value would be, and then people can make their own.
We'll just take Dave's house value and use it without it. Well, we won't identify it as Dave's. We'll just pick a number.
Dave, if we were to add, and just to throw out a rough number to make it easy, but let's say we did decide to add $1 million to the revenue, that would bring that tax rate down by roughly 50 cents, just a ballpark.
Yeah,
But
roughly for every $100,000 that you would add to revenue, that would lower the tax rate roughly 4.5 cents.
4.5 cents?
4.5 cents.
For every 100,000.
Mr. Robert, just to check real quick, the only other change I've spotted on here was that you were more precise with the motor vehicle tax. Is that
Correct, yes, I'm sorry, that number has been slightly updated.
okay?
Great. That's the million for,
It's like $35 difference or something. No.
okay. Any questions for the assessor?
Sorry, just a minor question. How many years back do you go for vehicle excise tax? How old does the vehicle have to be to have to pay, how new does it have to be to pay excise tax? Is there a year limit on anything? No, okay, okay.
But with the new phase out, in essence, in the town of Tiverton, since we have a $6,000 exemption on motor vehicles, it used to be any vehicle older than 25 years old had a set value of $500, so you never have a tax bill here in town. With the new phase out, I believe it's any vehicle older than 15 years, we have a set value of $500. How does that work? Same thing. So you could have a 1964 Corvette worth $40,000, but it's only assessed for $500.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So that brings us, I think, back to item 2 in some ways, or item 4, where discussions about where we are. We've come forth with a review and votes on all of the expenses. We've been presented with estimates of revenue from the town council. We got an opinion from the attorney that including gaming revenue can be done as long as we don't say exactly how it's used. And we have, as of this evening, an updated total assessment, which in of itself was also bringing the tax rate down.
So are we under number 4 now? We don't need to make a motion to go back to 2, right?
No.
All right. So under the description, the municipal revenue estimates, possible use of unreserved general fund surplus to partially offset tax levy. So I know we talked about this before. Some of you had asked about taking that 416,000, or it was suggested to us maybe by, what was it, Denise, town council, that we could take that, right? Because we know we have that. It's a known versus an unknown. So I know this is probably going to be a long conversation tonight. So I wanted to start it somewhere with, is that where the correct spot to jump off is to start at that amount, build up to that? I just would like to throw that out there to see. I mean, I know that I said $1 million. That was just a rough number. Some people said, well, I'm not comfortable. We don't have that money. We don't know when they're getting those checks. Town council president said, well, maybe you could use the 416,000, whatever the number was. So where do we start building a base?
I think there's three line items that we need to look at specifically, and that would be the one that's not on the page is casino revenue. I think we need to.
Can we call that gaming revenue just
Sure.
to make that
Yep.
that clear?
Gaming
'cause
revenue.
Yeah.
I think we need to look at food and beverage because what they're basing it on is the restaurants that are here and not the. I mean, food and beverage come under so many things. They're going to have 3 quick service restaurants, a sit-down restaurant, and just food for thought. Vending machines. You pay 1.08 on every bottle of soda that comes out of a vending machine. So that's how far your food and beverage tax goes. And I also think we need to look at the hotel tax. I think they've grossly underestimated the hotel tax at $1,500. That's based on a 1% from Airbnbs. That's not based on the 6% sales tax from a lodging that the town gets 25% of. So that $1,500.
Can you say that
Sure.
again?
So if you work in lodging, you assess 13% sales tax onto every room that you sell. It's 7% sales and 6% lodging. That 6% lodging gets divided up and 25% of it goes back to the town. If you're an Airbnb, the way that it works out, so if you're an Airbnb and you're renting out a whole cottage or you're renting out your whole house, the town or you're supposed to, and it's not really monitored correctly, but you pay 1%, not the full 6% lodging tax. If you rent out a room in your house as an Airbnb or HomeAway, you're required to collect the 7% tax and the 6%. So if you do a whole unit, you only have to pay 1%, but if you do a room, it's just how the laws have changed because when Airbnb came out and HomeAway came out, they did not catch up to the lodging. So this particular hotel is going to be assessed that 6%, and we're going to get 25% of that. But what's in this revenue stream is only the $1,500. Is that's got to be what they're collecting off. And there's no inns in town, so it's got to be Airbnb. It's got to be where they're generating. But that number has got to go up way more than that.
Well, if I may piggyback on what Ms. Joslin and I were talking about, just playing with some numbers before the meeting started, I just used some very gross numbers and said that if we were very conservative and said the hotel really didn't get started until January 1st, from January 1st to June 30th is 181 days. So if you take 181 days times 84 rooms, and then I said, well, the occupancy rate is going to be 30%. No science whatsoever. Come back there. Uh-oh.
181.
181. Having trouble? One more time, the machine is smarter than I am. 181 times 84 rooms times 0.30. And then I had made the giant assumption that it was going to be $100 a night, which is pretty reasonable. So based on that, there's going to be $456,120 of gross revenue. And then there's 6% of that.
Yeah, 6%, and then we deduct 25%.
So we get 1.5%.
Okay, so we get times 6% times 25%. So after all that, using that approach, we'd gain another $6,841, or to round up properly, $6,842. And that, I think, would be extremely conservative, but it would give a tip of the hat to the fact that we're going to get something. And I have no idea what the room rate is going to be.
It'll fluctuate throughout the year.
Yeah.
Historically, rooms are less in winter, and then when they
Yeah.
get the feedback, the overflow.
Yep. So that would be one number, or anybody could come up with a different scenario, different occupancy rate, different room rate. That's just one walkthrough.
So, just playing the devil's advocate, does anyone know, is it at all likely that the first 6 months the casino would tend to comp all their rooms in order to attract visitors?
There's two ways to look at it from my experience with casinos. Sometimes they will, and again, I still don't understand what the law is on comping, because you have to account it into somewhere, I would assume, because technically you could be like, I'm comping everything. There's two ways casinos do it. So you can just comp and say, come stay with us, we're going to give you a free night. There you go. Or if you have a player's card where you put the card in the machine and it accumulates points, those points equal dollars. So say you have 100 points on your card equals $100, you can go pay your hotel bill, you can go down to a restaurant and eat. That, on those bills, you do collect tax. Even if you're paying, you're paying with their money based on what your play is. But so there's two ways to look at that. Are they just going to outright comp, or are you going to use your points to, because your play has to be, they're not just going to comp you rooms, you have to be spending it in some other way. They're not just going to go, oh look, you put $20 in the machine, please take our $120 room. They equal it out to based on what your play is, and that's what that card in that machine is doing. It's taking account of how much money you're putting in that machine, and then they tier their players too. So you could be a baseline tier, you could be a platinum player. Platinum players are getting everything, because they base that based on what your spend is, and they also base it on what your quarterly spend is and what your yearly spend is. So if you're a value to be at a machine, it's worth comping.
But keep in mind, the casino's in the business to make money.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, they do give perks.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to give perks to anybody sitting in this room.
No.
They're going to give perks to the high
Unless
rollers,
we're high-stake
the people who
gamblers.
go a lot.
You don't know me, Jay, you don't know me.
Well,
You'd be
Yeah.
surprised though. If you
I'm a little aware of how this works, because a good friend of mine was one of these types of people. And yeah, he got perks, and we used to go to Foxwoods all the time and eat for free and have a good time, and we never stayed there. But he spent
They also
30 grand a year at that casino.
So we're making it up on the other side.
But they also
But-
do things too if they haven't seen you in at that point. I go to a work conference once every 18 months, and we haven't gone in the last 2 years. They're still sending us like, you can have 4 free nights, you can have this, you can have. I haven't been there in 2 years, so they also pool their plays that they haven't seen
Right.
as well.
Could you? Was there any similar analysis or thoughts about like the food and beverage? So, the big variable right here, I think a number of these assumptions are pretty good, except for the occupancy rate. You put it at 30, could be 50, could be 25, right? But we're really probably talking about small dollars and all. Relative to the lodging tax, would food and beverage be a similar calculation?
I don't know, if you look at that line item right now, based on the limited amount of restaurants that we have, it's at $200,000.
232%. That does take into account Tom's market as well.
Prepared food.
The prepared food is taxed differently.
Prepared food is taxed with that extra percent there. So
What page is food and beverage?
the last one on that revenue. 4906.
Yeah, it's almost the very bottom. So to me, that if we're $10,000 to $20,000 combining these items, those are all within like the ability to manage things for the town council. The bigger one in terms of the gaming revenue of trying to figure out our best judgment of what might come in is the biggie. That if we're off by percentages, it's going to dwarf anything that we're looking at in terms of lodging and tax.
So we know that this meals and beverage tax does not include casino
Yeah.
food.
That,
We know
yeah,
that.
because look
at the previous
there's
year.
the budget,
Oh,
and there's the
yeah,
actual.
yeah.
But that line item, those are the 3 line items that we need to look to increase.
Do we need to start talking about each line item first and make sure we have a number
We can do
before
the
we do
smaller
anything
ones
else?
first. Obviously we're going to get hung up on the casino one.
Well,
We should start somewhere, though. So what I'm saying, we should start
here's
somewhere.
here's an idea. Is
Is your microphone? Yes, you're on.
it on? what if we were to max out on all the items like the hotel tax, the meal and beverage tax, the police detail, the police and fire detail, and also propose to take all of the money in the general fund that's above the 3%. And then that way it it recognizes that there's going to be a lot more money coming in. But it also doesn't put it so far out of reach that if anything were to happen, we would still be able to cover it. We'd still be whole.
So what you're saying is we would only go to a max of the 416?
No, I'm saying you add in the 416, you go to the food and beverage
Oh, and
tax.
then you add on to the 416.
And you add, and you go to the hotel tax, and you don't add 6,000, you add 40,000. You say, okay, 30% of half a year, 100% or 100% is going to be about 40. So
you're always going to get more in the summer, and I also too think that you're going to get more in that first quarter.
And so you max out on those things that have a more ready promise, and then you don't gamble on the other.
On the gaming revenue.
You don't gamble on the gaming.
No pun intended.
Yeah,
Right?
pun intended.
Don't gamble, right?
Pun intended.
Justin, what was the number you had a couple weeks back for the state?
9 and change.
9 and change?
900 and change.
Because it was prorated?
935.
900.
583.
Say that again, please.
948, 583.
And double that is 1.8, 1.9 million. So just based on gaming revenue alone, on that calculation, looking at 1.9 million, 1 million is extremely conservative if you ask me. I know you guys don't like to hear that, but...
Even
Wait,
if we,
why are you doubling it?
Well, you said that's per quarter.
No,
Prorated.
no. That's what they
That's
said
what
for the
they said
entire
that-
year.
Oh, that's for the entire from November to...
That's what
prorated.
the
Gotcha.
divisional lottery
Okay.
suggested for the full year.
I still think we
But
have
that's
a
the
little bit of wiggle room. I'm kind of with you with the 460, but I think we could even go into the 5 low 6 and not create such a deficit for the town. Almost double what's over there. I think like if you, I don't know, I think we could go a little higher than that 460, but maybe not the full.
And that 948 is also a minimum.
That's correct.
So if
That's
the,
what they think
so
we're going to get.
That's the rest. The minimum that's in statute that
Is-
will normally be 3 million
yes.
does not apply at all the first
Okay,
year.
so that okay.
Unless it opens July 1st.
So if the place is slamming, the only thing we'll realize different there is food and beverage, hotel.
No. We'll still get
Okay.
our
so
percentage by the calculation.
that's what I'm saying. So this is minimum. It's the minimum guarantee.
Well, it's their estimate. Well, it's not. No, it's not
They don't- they
guaranteed.
can't-
In the future, if they do $1 million of business, we'll still get 3 million.
For next fiscal year, there's zero guarantee.
Yeah.
Zero guarantee.
This could be
But there's a
more, could be
calculation.
less.
There's an estimate.
This,
It's on the wording of saying for the first full year
Yeah.
operation of it, you are guaranteed. We will not be in for FY19 a full year. Is that correct?
Right.
So they're going to say,
I mean, we could play devil's advocate too. Isn't it in their contract if they sell it to somebody else, we don't get anything? If they change hands, our contract is currently with Twin River. If they sell it to
Twin River
whatever, me, I don't know. That contract's null and void,
So
and we'd have to reevaluate. I thought there was something in the contract about the sale. Their contract is only with Twin River. Not that they're gonna, but if we're
Well, it's much. I think it's much more complicated than that. I mean, the minimum's written into state law. That's not part of any contract. So any business that were to come in would have to go through the General Assembly.
and they could renegotiate.
Assume that obligation.
You would think that would be
You would
the
think.
easiest. I mean, if they had better lobbyists, maybe they can try to change the deal a little bit. But
Well, let me say something. I'll be the devil's advocate here. We are in Rhode
There are a
Island.
lot of devils here.
When was the last time anybody in this room saw a state estimate of anything come in at the number they originally gave or lower?
But we,
Just humor me.
Depends on how you look at it, because I got a registration fee back with interest, so.
No, but,
Depends on how you look at it.
you know, when they say this project is going to cost $10 million, and about 2 months later, what do you see on the news? Whoops, it's really 14, folks.
but this, but the state's not building.
No, I'm not,
this.
what I'm inferring is that any number that the state gives you, until the day you start cashing their checks, is an estimate, not necessarily even a good faith estimate. It's just their estimate.
But if we came in at $1 million, we're over what they're even anticipating. So we have to come back to that number and go, what is a favorable? Are we at the 4 and change? I still think we could do more than the 4 and change.
Well,
without going to
I'm
this full line.
suggesting more than the 416. I'm saying bring the police and fire up to as high as they think they might go, and also increase the meal and beverage and the hotel tax.
I think we should do that too, but I think we should also look at coming up a little bit higher than that 416.
Can I ask a question of the treasurer? So the number that we are right now above the 3% was 416,000. We're at the beginning of April, right? So does that, the level of confidence that we would end this fiscal year with that amount, is it, I know things can change, but is that a high level of confidence? I mean, really what we're trying to do is like, what can we absorb above the 3% that doesn't put us into the town and into hardship, if you will. So I guess how confident are we that we'll end up FY19 with $420,000 above the 3%?
That's a good question, because we calculate that number every year after we close. Right now, revenue is, there's a few good categories of revenue that are up. A few of the smaller ones are down, but I haven't closed March yet. And I'm not expecting any one-time occurrences like we've had in previous years where we sell the library or we sell the industrial park, nothing like that. So strictly, it's just been just areas of different revenue that's been creeping up.
Mm-hmm.
Both of our courts have been down a little bit, but I'm not terribly concerned about that because that just changes all the time. I don't think that we're going to, I don't think that we'll be in a position to give up much more than the 416. Our expenses are pretty tight. So when we look at it net.
So it's not likely to grow due to saving on expenses.
Because I think that once we close the year and everything's said and done, we've had a few unusual expenses. There was several retirements this year that were not planned. So I think we're going to kind of end the year pretty close,
Mhm.
as we've done in the past. And then once we do all of the resolution things and reserve the funds that we have, voted on at the FTR, I don't see us ending with any kind of significant surplus.
Okay.
That'll go into the unreserved general.
Great. Thank you.
If we had a deficit under the 3%, is it legal, or is there a way that anything over and above what the school has, the town can take the money and put it in? You can't do that.
Can't take it.
Okay.
It's not yours.
But they can't give it either.
They can.
They're not
I'm just asking. I'm just thinking. That's all.
You can't. That's creating a whole nother argument that we already had, and that I'm not comfortable with.
That went to court,
And the other thing is we asked the school, a lot of people asked the school department to spend the surplus, and they brought the surplus down. They came in before us, they asked for level funding, they showed where they were spending the surplus.
I was just thinking natural disaster. Is that legally something that can happen? Can the town and the school work a deal temporarily to
Just
put money to cover something that's in a
just to
structural
be very
deficit?
clear, the 6, 7, I don't know, I'm losing track of time. Some years ago, the then treasurer, absorbed the money that was over because the school committee actually got more money than they had anticipated. The school sued the town. The process for that is to go through the Rhode Island Department of Education, which I think is really horrible because they set the regulations and then they adjudicate them, which is ridiculous. But that's where it stopped. It could have gone to the Supreme Court, but the town never, so it hasn't quite gotten, not to Superior Court, sorry. So it hasn't quite gotten through all of the legal hoops, just to be clear about that. We should consider that the precedent, though. I've had the school department's lawyer specifically say that if the school committee is the authority that decides what is an educational expense and what is necessary for education. So my understanding from that conversation with their attorney is that whatever the school committee says is critical to the education of students in Tiverton. If they think they're stressful parents because of a tax bill is going to affect education, they could donate. They could allocate money. That's my understanding. If they think the middle school is too high, they could buy a fire truck with a ladder or something like that. That's their discretion. Whether they'll do that is a whole other question.
There was an example, I think it was in Portsmouth, where money was taken from the school reserve and they lost the case. And they ended up spending a whole lot of money on the litigation. There was another case.
Just
one of the things we hadn't talked about is I don't think I see any revenue in here from the Lomplex, and I know that it's had its problems.
They
But-
just announced today they're open in July.
Yeah, they've been going fits and starts, so there's
I
going to
don't
be
think we can't even come.
some revenue from that,
Well,
but I don't see anything reflected.
That's one I wouldn't bank on.
I wouldn't,
Yeah,
I wouldn't.
But the
that-
casino-
That went bankrupt.
One thing I want to say about the casino, though,
Announced today they're open on July
is
1st.
Building.
that non-guarantee that has been spoken of with the casino first full year of operation. I'm looking at that portion of the state law. Upon commencement of the operation of video lottery games at Twin River, Tiverton, 1 in 4,500. I need glasses. Did I just say that? 1 in 4,500%, so 1.45% of net terminal income of authorized machines comes back to Tiverton. It says upon commencement of the operation. So nothing in there says first full year. I mean, somewhere else, if I keep reading, might, but that's...
There is additional language. I'm not looking at that right now, but I've triple checked that. We get
why I'm trying to
the
stick it to
formula money. Whatever the formula says, we get. We
Right.
get. So it could be more than 958, could be less. Just depends on the business they do. It's the minimum, that 3 million minimum.
Prorated.
So the second year in 2020, if for some reason it's a ghost town and they have one gamer the entire year, we still get that 3 million bucks
Whether they
Okay.
get it-
that year forward. But the minimum doesn't start until the first full year.
And that's because it's not opening on July 1st. We're not open for...
Well, that would be a full year. Yeah, that's how the mechanism they use. And I think that's probably something similar to what
Well, that'd be July
any
1st,
charter review thing that
2019.
where they allocated it would probably do something similar, saying the first full year of operations, the money goes to X, and that would hedge the bets.
I have a question for the treasurer. Denise, you were going to check and see with other towns when they pay the towns. Did you find that out?
No, I did not get an answer. I reached out to the state about the meals and beverage and the hotel tax, and he gave me some other information. He did not answer those questions. So I actually was talking to Dave about seeing if he could find something. So it's almost like we're not getting the information.
But that's not the new, though. Not getting information.
What a job that the state doesn't answer questions.
So looking at this revenue sheet, regardless of what the numbers are, as I look at this thing, the only thing that we could expect any changes in and I may be wrong because I don't know how their contracts are going to be, would be liquor licensing, victualizing licensing, holiday business license, private detail police, private detail fire,
Tobacco dealer license, where they have cigarette machines and stuff?
a hotel tax,
They'll
a
have
meals and beverage tax, and maybe,
casinos are the only thing that are
but
excluded.
I don't
from that,
know,
though.
the tobacco
Yeah, I haven't seen a cigarette machine at Foxwoods.
No, but
vendor,
they sell them
whatever
at
you
Newport
call it.
Grand.
In a cigarette machine?
That's the only
Yeah,
thing is
shops
that we
sell
can
cigarettes,
expect.
and Newport Grand sells
Because
cigarettes.
Denise, what's on the sheet now doesn't reflect any of those for the casino, right?
Except for fire.
So we could take a wild,
for the fire.
except for fire. So we could take a wild guess on what we think those things might increase to.
Good, but those license fees, and Nancy says she'd probably be able to tell you better, but some license fees are less than $100. They're an annual fee,
Yeah, so they're not going to be a lot.
so it wouldn't amount to.
We need to start moving here.
If some of those licenses, like the liquor license, she knows this is what I'm collecting this year because we only have X amount of liquor licenses
At a time.
How does that work? Does that whole place have one liquor license, or does each individual restaurant or dealer have a liquor license, or does it come all
Probably
under one?
individual.
I would imagine.
It's one of my own.
That's not big ticket stuff.
Well, yeah, a
No,
wild
but it
guess
all
would be
adds up.
that even if these line items on this change, if we saw an increase of $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000, that would probably be a lot,
The big items are going to be
except for
the
the
details.
detail.
The big items are going to be the food and beverage, the details, the
So do we have to vote? Is that the point that we're at now besides
Yeah,
beating
well,
this up?
no, I think what
We have to vote on the revenue.
we do.
So like Mike had initially said, if we start with the little stuff here, let's start with the fire department, start with the police department, work our way up to the one that's gonna keep us here till midnight. At least we can get the other ones out of the way.
yeah. I mean, I think there's some here that we can agree on.
But I think part of it, there's two things as I look at it. One is some level of confidence that November 1st is going to happen, right? That's going to determine, that's going to trigger things in terms of the gaming revenue, and when the police and the fire, some of this additional revenue, and all these other things, that sort of when it opens. And my guess would be is that the payment for detail work and food and beverage and all those other things, that those will come in. Those are going to be smaller. The second question to me would be is to say, if it does open in the fiscal year, the level of confidence that we will get that money from the state. And
If I could just chime in real quick on the question of when Lincoln gets the money. I'm looking through all of the transfers of money from the state lottery division to Lincoln, and they get a piddling amount to a government of about $30,000 every month or every few weeks, probably actual lottery. But then within a week of the end of every quarter, they get a $1.5 to $2 million deposit from the lottery division. So it looks like, interpreting just from the headings of these columns, that they actually get the money within a week of the end of the quarter.
And this is a line transfer, amazing.
So even if they didn't, I think Mrs. Surratt would count the state as a reasonable risk in terms of an account receivable and book that as appropriate.
But that wasn't my question. My question was, when do the other towns pay? So thank you, Justin.
But we could hold state land hostage.
what was your,
If you book it when it's earned,
Yeah, I just said.
Right, well, I'm hoping, they literally give you no information
Right,
with the money.
I understand.
So I don't even know what kind of data we'll be getting. And I'm interested to see what it is that you're looking at.
it's just the transparency.ri.gov. It has all the expenditures for the state. And if you search for Lincoln,
The new portal,
well, yeah, I guess it's still new.
But all I was saying was that you would count the state as a valid accounts receivable.
Right.
Versus Cecil Leonard Incorporated, where you would say, well, we're not
They're
so
not a
sure
risky
about that.
creditor.
right, we like to make sure that it's a sure thing.
So if I go to page 2, which everybody's been talking about. The fire department has 65,000 on private detail. So I understand what I'm hearing. We're saying, okay, even though there's some dispute about that, we're gonna use that 65,000.
I'm open to dropping it, only because of the dispute they had about 2 versus 1.
Yeah.
One thing that was made clear, I talked to Denise about it after the meeting, was I had mentioned authority having jurisdiction. Because the state is involved with this facility, the fire marshal's office would have the overall jurisdiction. That doesn't mean the fire chief can't try to put a wedge in that. He does have avenues, but overall, though, it is the state fire marshal. And if they're saying 1 per the agreement now, then that's the safe bet we have to go with, even though something could end up being worked out between our authority having jurisdiction, the fire chief, and state fire marshal's office. So the safe bet is to actually lower that.
I think closer to the police, because the other thing I had a hard time with when he spoke about it was when he sat down, he was like, "Oh, I put 100,000 in, and that's not what we had."
Well,
and then we asked him, "How did you get to 65?" And he didn't know how we got to that number.
See, that's where I think the biggest discrepancy is the chief first said it was 100,000, then said he misspoke and it was 65. And if I'm already asking the police chief, Jones, he had said to us 50,000 would be the estimate, adding it to the 15 that was already there.
He gave us all the calculations too. The
Right.
fire chief was.
So I mean, that 65, I'm kind of with Dave a little bit. I'd be more up to drop it down to like 50,
Well,
thinking 1 person.
if there's 1 person, you'd cut that
That's
65
in
two.
half.
No, because I think he initially in his mind thought
You
100,000.
gotta keep in mind, though, too, that there
But that
will
we-
be times
And he calculated it
where
24 hours.
the fire marshal's office would require a second fire detail there. And there's
Why?
a good
Because
chance
of-
that there would be one there on Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
It goes
Does it go by square footage or by population?
occupancy, I thought. Because if you have a full floor, or you have entertainment going on too, or you have people,
That's the thing where you would see the second.
yeah.
So
It's by occupancy.
I'm still comfortable with the 50.
I mean, I like 50. He put 65. We'd shave it by 15 grand.
I thought taking a third off, somewhere in that neighborhood.
But I think if they got 1 person, 1 firefighter, 24/7, they're gonna bring in at
The
the
other thing to take into account is they did make this calculation at 24/7. We don't know if it's going to be 24/7
Correct.
or if it's going to mirror
Yeah, it could be
Newport's
compared.
hours.
Correct.
Which Newport's hours are 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day, with the exception of weekends and holidays where they go at 2 a.m. Alcohol stops serving
Right.
at 1 o'clock. Machines
Chief
automatically shut
Jones.
themselves
Chief
off
Jones
at 2.
did say he did it at 24, but he also said he was being very conservative.
But
Very
he had a whole
conservative
calculation when
for the
he said that,
calculation.
yeah.
So he wasn't going to throw anything out that needed to be changed after the fact. So all I'm proposing, my idea would be, if it's 50,000 from police, I'm taking out the 15,000 he had in there before. 50,000. Excuse me. Chief Jones says he's adding 50,000 in for the detail for casino. That's what he told us.
So that would make that number 59.5.
He had 15,085, and he said to add in 50,000, which I have a number of 65,085.
One other food for thought, though, too, is that the fire chief did say if ambulance runs came out of there, that would be additional third-party billing that was not accounted in this, because we saw a big increase last year in the third-party billing, and any ambulance run, that
Right.
line could increase as well.
He did increase it this year, though.
I don't think he didn't increase it based on casino, though.
No, he had not.
What he said pretty much was that any runs that were generated by that casino would probably be people that didn't live in Tiverton.
So they could build them.
I mean,
If that were the case, we could go after 100%, but, how do you figure what you're gonna get there?
Right.
You really don't know until you've done it for a year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's already busted, as Jen just said, 100 grand.
Right.
So let's stop at the private detail fire.
Mm-hmm.
Are we comfortable with 50 grand?
I'm comfortable with 50 grand. I think it's conservative.
Okay. All right, now-
That's 1
So do we
person.
want to make a motion on that particular line and start moving forward?
Okay, I'll make a motion that we're gonna modify account 4280 private detail fire from the listed 65,000 down to 50,000.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion?
Just one question. I've had a note 7 months worth. Is that come into this at all? Not the whole year? Or does that not come into this?
No, they said as of November 1st, right?
Okay, thanks.
Right, that was the calculation, November 1st?
Okay.
And I think that was his explanation for the difference from 100 to 65.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
He was saying that 100 was
Correct.
prorated, but
Prorated.
then he said, well,
I think
maybe
you're
that
right.
100 was a full year, so 65 would be the prorated.
Right, so it should be half would be 33 or something like that.
But he was still at 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
He was still at 2 people 24 hours a
He was a
day.
little tangled up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and seconded to take the private detail fire 4280 from the 65,000 estimated and dropping it to 50,000. Okay. All in favor? And it is 9-2.
No, 9,
8-2.
8, 8, 2.
We're missing
Oh, I'm
Alex.
sorry.
8-2.
Or were there any abstentions?
With-
Opposed? Great.
2 opposed.
Okay, so now I'm gonna move down to private detail police. What is the thinking on the police detail? I got a little tangled up from Chief Jones between what was net and what was gross.
In the end, I think he said that the total projection for a year would be 84,271. That would be 13% of the total that was 648,000 and change. And then I would assume he got the 50 from prorating it to the months that it would be applied.
So I have written down yearly. I have written down 48,683.70 would be the administrative fee the town would realize for police details. He said the cruiser money would go into a separate account that was. Did he say that?
Maintenance.
The maintenance account. So I have written down here, and I think it's in the minutes
Well-
tonight.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go.
My understanding from up till now, they haven't even been declaring that money, so it's just been going toward a cruiser fund. I recall him saying something to the effect of it's never been this much, so there's going to be a lot extra. The number I had written down was for the projection for this coming year from him was 182,824. That would be all inclusive of
And
detail,
just-
the cruiser fee, the administrative fee, and all that.
And am I right in that when you collect it, it goes into this account, wherever they put it, distributed after, it's the same thing as talking about the casino revenue. It comes in as revenue,
Yeah,
but where
yes.
they distribute it to. So if it's going into the maintenance account, that's on the other side. Right? But it comes into this line item as the revenue.
Well,
No, it doesn't.
No?
There's no revenue line item for detail. This is what was pointed out with the current details.
Oh, for the car.
So there's no actual revenue line here to throw that in unless we put it under miscellaneous and create.
Yeah, heretofore, money that was collected from a vehicle used at a detail in the maintenance always has and never been questioned. But his statement was, well, it's going to be a hell of a lot more this time, folks, so we better talk about it.
Right, but up to now, and this is something year after year, you find these little things throughout the budget. There was no expenditure on the maintenance fund. There was no revenue from it. It was just completely off the books, kind of. I called it a slush fund. I didn't like that, but
How about in the cloud? It was in the cloud.
but there weren't clouds though until just a few years ago.
In the cloud.
Well, it was never with regard to our budget process and FTMs, FTRs. This is money that comes in as a negative expense, so it's never really. It hasn't been disclosed necessarily through the budgeting process that this was part of the town's budget. I mean, I'm sure within the accounting and the audit, I'm sure it's in there somewhere as well, but that's what I meant by it. Yeah.
1999 was as far back as I could go. It's been treated as a reimbursement to the vehicle maintenance account, to pay us for the use of our vehicle, or to reimburse reimburse us for the expenses associated with allowing them to use our vehicle. There's only been one time in the last 5 years, since 1999, right? One time in the last 4 or 5 years that they bought a cruiser. And that was brought to the council, and they reduced the request for the following year by a cruiser because he saw that they, I think when the bridge was moved up, the bridge and Fish Road, so there was a lot of unexpected money coming in, and you know, he made an argument, I won't budget for the cruiser next year, I have this money coming in for the, as a reimbursement to the vehicle account, is there any way we could buy the council vehicle?
And that was Chief Blue.
Yes, but that's the only time cruisers have been bought with that money.
Chief Jones also did make clear that this is an anomaly. That's apparently not going to be an anomaly anymore because if we have a cruiser there at 24 or whatever, so up until now we haven't had much of a revenue stream from police detail.
Up until last year, well, up until the year of the bridge, that was an anomaly. But we have talked on multiple occasions about trying to figure a better way to account for the vehicle reimbursement.
So do you see a revenue line being added at some point?
I think you really would have to analyze, you know, just like when you do your tax return, what you are allowed to take as, you know, if you use the IRS guidelines, 54 cents a mile, however you do that, you want to figure out, well, what does it actually cost the town to have the vehicle there? Rather than, it's just, you know, they've been charging $20 since 1999. So,
That fee needs to go up.
well,
Somebody's got to
Not for
bargain.
us to decide.
But now,
Yeah,
what's reflected as private detail police, currently 15,000 and change, that's only the administrative
that's
fee.
13%.
Yeah, thank you.
So if you look at, to me, the calculations, the chief went through all of the sort of the gross revenue that would come and then subtracting out labor and things. Seems to me the town fee is something that he had quoted. That was the 48,683 was for a full year of operation on his assumptions, right? So to me, looking at that, if part of what we're guessing in terms of the fire, and then we're going to come to the gaming revenue and say, okay, we're guessing that this place is going to open on November 1st or whenever that we use the same methodology, is if you took the 48,683 and times 2/3 of a year, so that's 8 months, right? November 1st through June. That would be one way of estimating conservatively what the town's going to get, is what that fee would be. The other question that we just brought up would be is that there's going to be a significant amount of a credit to an expense account, or however it ends up getting changed, is for the vehicle. And that was where I thought I had down in here was that he was estimating this would be for a full year. That was like 175,000.
Right.
Is that right? So if you took the $175,200, the 48,683, you add those up, and then you times it by 2/3, I was coming up with $148,000. So that's sort of the net that the town receives from this police detail. Is one reasonable, based on thinking 8 months.
And that includes that revenue from the vehicles.
It does, right?
We've never reflected that before.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out, because she'd have to eventually on her end make a line item, I guess. Unless we just make a new description for that. Police detail, including cruiser.
Oh, it's still police detail. I mean,
He had said there was 394,000 that went to pay the police, 30,000 to FICA, 175,000 to the cruiser maintenance, 48,000 to the Tiverton fee administration, and that when you add all those up, you get about 650, and the town ends up getting 13% of that number. which is roughly 84,000.
Is that how everyone understands it? I don't know.
That's that.
So he gave us four numbers. The cost of paying the police salary was $394,200.
Which the town doesn't get anything. That goes
Right.
to us.
And the FICA was 30,156.
Mhm.
That
The
gets to the feds.
cruiser fee was 175,200, and the money that went to the town for administration fee was 48,683. And he said the way he calculated it was he added all of those up and then multiplied it by 13%, and that's what comes to the town. And that would be $84,271.
Yeah, he lost me with the 13%.
Because I think the 13% is how you get to the
To the-
48,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's how you get to the 48.
yeah,
Gotta be right.
we get the whole cruiser fee.
Yeah, we're gonna get that whole.
We charge 20% upcharge on the 394,200. And then that 20% is split between FICA and the town.
So the 13 is our share of that 300 well, the charge.
So is it 13% of those first two numbers?
It's 13% of, well, you take the 394,200, we charge an upcharge of 20%, which is 78,000 rounding.
Okay.
78,000, we take the 7.65% of that goes to FICA, and then 13.35%, whichever, to the town.
Okay, well, I figured it slightly different. We came up with 147,000 and change. And I think somebody else has
That's what
calculated
Brendan-
148. So we're in the range of 148.
That's in total, if you looked at the three items in total, you get 148.
No, all I did
Yeah.
was take 175,
Mhm.
then 48, added those together, and then took 66 and 2/3% of that for the partial year.
Correct.
But then do you account for the maintenance fees,
Nope.
for the actual maintenance fees that go up in the fire department? Don't we have to add that into that segment of the budget?
There's no maintenance issue with the fire department.
Or
As long as the
sorry, police department. Police department. So if we're taking away that the money that they would ordinarily get to maintain the vehicles,
Well, what was the 175?
That was,
I believe the 175 was,
buy a new.
That's a car, 24 hours, 365
Yeah, so
days a
that's
year.
the vehicle. So I took the vehicle plus the 48,000 administrative fee.
right?
Then
But-
66%.
Oh, so you're
Right.
saying recognize the 175 as revenue?
Yes.
But in the past, it hasn't been recognized, and the money has been used for the maintenance of the vehicles.
Right.
And so if we're going to take this, then we also have to add in actual maintenance cost into the budget.
no, but he said that there was not a need to buy another car for this purpose, so there,
Wasn't it
So-
just some conversation about
About
Twin
swapping
River
an
may
old
buy a
for
car?
new car.
right. So in other words, in the expense side of things, it's a good question to say, wow, we could be charging $175,000 because we'll have a Tiverton police vehicle there 24/7. Do we need to buy a new vehicle? And the answer was no. So the assumption would be is that in the our spreadsheet, when he's talking about maintaining and running all the vehicles, that he's accounted for that vehicle, the gas, the tires, the wear and tear on it. Not that you need to add in more.
The other thing too was that the vehicle, the discussion we had too is that I guess they plan to buy a vehicle, Twin River. It's not solid, but the plan is for Twin River to purchase a vehicle. They
So
might.
they've
He's
done
gonna take
that in
that new
Lincoln.
one, put it on the road, and take one of the oldest ones we
Right,
have and
put
throw
it
it over there.
Because that's what
And I
they've done in
think-
Lincoln.
I mean, I would imagine it's just going to stay there. If the policeman's wandering around, he's not going to leave it running.
Right.
And there's still going to be other details that will still accrue the money from
That's
the...
true too, is that the wear and tear, that particular vehicle is not gonna be running all day. sitting
But, and there will also be money from the normal details,
Well, that's what I
which
was
they
gonna say,
already
that's
have.
not in that calculation. So that calculation is just based on the casino details. It's not National Grid, Verizon, all the other places that you generate.
And I don't think I haven't heard anybody suggest adding that in as well, so...
So I think what my understanding is what Cecil and Brendan both had a rough calculation, call it 148. The only thing is that's on 24 hours a day, which we still don't know yet for sure, correct?
I think to be conservative, we should really think about sticking to what Newport's at until they make a decision that it is going to be, because that's been in the news a lot. I mean, the neighbors don't want, I don't know where it'll end, but if you want to be conservative, what you should base it on is the current operating hours of Newport Grand and not the 24.
Right.
So how many hours a
How
day
many
is that?
hours a
So
day?
they are open every day from 10 a.m. till 1 a.m.
1 a.m.
and on weekends until 2 a.m.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Friday, Saturday, I'm not sure about Sunday, Friday, Saturday, and on holidays. And alcohol stops being served at 1.
1. They're open till 2.
2, yeah. And then everything just automatically shuts off.
So 4 days a week they're open for 15 hours, and 3 days a week they're open 16, which
Yes.
is a lot less than 24.
Yes. So a number of
And it may
148.
come in at 24, but that's just to add in, but,
Just the 2 cents, the state's estimating 24 for their...
right. But that hasn't, that's kind of when we come into the argument of like, what number should we be at? Let's be conservative. It may be the 24, but if it doesn't come in, then you're really going to have a
Right.
shortfall.
I mean, it's still going to come in. It's going to come in.
Consider knocking the
But
number down
if they
by
close
like
early, there might be more
20%.
fights, which would lead to more ambulance
yeah.
calls. And,
More billing.
I don't know.
Why would that be?
but we get the revenue from the fights.
There's one other question that I
Oh,
would
people
have
get
too,
money.
I guess it's for Chief Jones. Is that detail the exact operating hours, or is that detail an hour before open and an hour after close? I mean, the employees aren't walking out the door with the patrons, and there's a ton of money in the place, so.
Yeah, but they also have their own private security in there too.
Yeah,
That
but-
clear the building and
It is next to Fall River.
I think the number we have is a we sort of have a hard number
What is that number?
based
think there's a
well the 148 based
Well-
upon 24-hour operation
But that includes the vehicle maintenance.
includes the vehicle.
Which
Yes.
Mr. Ashley properly points out, there's an offsetting expense. So we can't count all that 175.
but it doesn't account for the details, the normal details either.
We're budgeting
Oh.
the 47.
I'm thinking that the 15,000 that's already in there.
Oh, add that in.
Correct.
Looks like a trend line
Right.
over the years that we've run 12, 15,000.
The 15 is the police detail, not including the vehicle.
Yeah.
Yes, without the
That's
vehicle.
just salary.
So if you
And did not
eliminate the vehicle, then you're down to 48,000, which 66% of that is 32,000. So take your pick how you want to calculate it.
The first decision we have to make is: are we adding the vehicles in for budgeting purposes as
Why
revenue?
wouldn't we?
Well, because we've never done it.
We've never done it. Do we set precedents and just put it in there? I mean, we're not harming it. We're not saying how it's used, right? We're
It's
just
just
calculating for
every,
it.
As a gross number, and as Mr. Ratchley points out, we've got to net it out, because there is some business
You have to
expense.
add it in here.
You have to, right?
Yeah.
Well, but again, the vehicle's going to sit there. It's not going to be, idling in the parking lot.
Yep.
And this is in addition to the other details. So those details will provide the same amount of maintenance fee that would normally be provided.
Yeah. That's what he
I
did
don't
say.
think the town's losing money. I think the maintenance will be okay. I mean, I understand where you're coming from,
But we can't include all of it.
No, we don't have to go.
but we're still budgeting 46, 47 million, 1,000. It's a lot of vehicles. 47,528 for vehicle maintenance. It does say maintenance mechanic. But
That's the pay.
Yeah,
That's
that's just
salary.
what's paid. That doesn't count for.
So it's not included.
Apparatus and maintenance, hold on. Yeah. Well, you guys can keep talking, I'll find it. It was just on a different line.
So where are we at, do we think, people are suggesting for a number for the police detail?
If we're gonna add in the vehicles, a number came out of 148. That's 24 hours. I don't think we should do that. So we also know that
Jen, 13.5.
this 15,000 is already there. This is not casino related. So what if we take the 48,000 that he said, he rounded it to 50 when he did his presentation, am I right? Didn't he round it to say about 50,000?
Kind of left it at 48.
All right, 48. I'll call it 50, and 148, I'll round it to 150. Those are more even numbers. Why don't we maybe split the difference at 100? I'm just throwing out okay.
Based on the numbers of, and of course none of this is official, but we heard might apply to Newport and Grant. That's like 92 hours a week, not 168. So yeah, we need to knock about,
It's 55%.
maybe, yeah, we need to knock at least 30% off of this imaginary number to keep us in some sort of reasonable ballpark.
And we're talking about the car and the administrative fee, everything.
I know, but you
right?
know, at some point, if I was in that casino, at some point I would say, it's going to cost me a hell of a lot less money to buy them a car than to keep on paying them. And that's what would happen.
But isn't it already in the contract for now?
Hey, I would.
I'm just
imagine
asking,
that
is
at
it-
some point, they can say,
Right.
we need to cut our
I don't know
losses
if
here,
it was
and, you know,
in the
if they offer
contract
us a car, do you think we're going to say no?
But we're just talking about this budget year we're setting
Oh, I
up.
understand.
So if that happens in the future, then you can go back. You
But
can
remember-
reset the.
Details are monthly, well, a daily thing.
And is that why the town council hasn't included it? Because it's still unknown.
Yes, they haven't said whether the casino's going to be open. That's an unknown. They don't know if it's 24-hour operation. I just threw a split the difference number. That's what I did. So you could say that's an awful thing to suggest. You could say it's very conservative. You could say that's not as conservative as it needs to be. So
Wait, will you repeat your number for me, please?
sure. So the initial, I'm keeping the 15,000 that was already in here out.
Correct.
Okay, that's different. We're just talking about casino gambling, casino police detail.
I think we need
If we had 48,000,
and recalculate
right, that was
for
the
hours.
real administration fee that we could realize, and then we had 148,000 was the car, correct?
170.
No. 175
Right.
would be a full year,
Correct.
24 hours a day for the car fee. The 48,683 was the town's fee.
Right.
The total comes up to rounding 148,000 for a full year.
Okay. So 148,000 for a full year. So
And I think you
If-
readjust for the hour difference.
if you readjust for the hour difference backwards,
Divided by-
and you're taking off 33%, almost 33%.
I'm sorry, how do you get 148? 170?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
How do you get 175 plus 48?
You do 175 plus the 48,
48.
times two-thirds, 0.66. That gives you the November 1st opening through June. So we've said that. Then we're trying to say, being conservative, if this is not open 24 hours a day, but rather roughly the average of 15 hours, whatever it is, that comes out to 55%
Right.
of the total hours.
No, I did something wrong here.
I was using rough numbers.
Yeah,
I was going
yeah,
from
I
48 to
have
50 and from
to
148 to 150. So if you take off 33%, you would go from 150 to 100. And I'm not saying that's the number. I'm just saying you're taking off for the hours.
And then what do you add in for vehicle
I can't
maintenance?
believe this is what we use for
Well,
calculators.
Dave was saying that we've already got it covered in the operating budget.
Yeah, it's 13.5 was the number.
What page is that?
It's
It's on
under
page 9.
Now, what What percent reduction was the hours, Jen?
I'm sorry, I knew the hours.
55%.
55%.
So we took 98 into 168. Excuse me, 92.
I just want to check to make sure I'm
92.
right on the 10.
92 hours and a possible 168 gives you 55% of a day. Take 148 times the 55% gives you $81,400.
Give me 1 second, Brendan, too. I just want to check I'm right on the 10. Yeah, 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't 9. It is 10.
I interject here. I just opened my notes and I wrote down that a September 1st opening would mean 182,000. So that would be for 10 months. Not
Is that what Chief Jones said? Is that what you're saying? Is that
well,
the notes?
I think because he gave us everything in a daily amount,
Right.
and so I just calculated by the daily amount, and starting with I could recalculate that by a November 1st. But my point only being that I think because everybody's been saying full year would be 179 or whatever, but I think that was
holidays they go.
already the
And they're
partial
open
year.
365 days a year.
So that was without July
Oh,
and
it's just
August.
Friday and Saturday. not
September.
Sunday.
And holiday. So
Right.
if
I
the
think
holiday-
the 179. I didn't write that one down, but I think that would
Which-
probably have been
If it's a holiday
an October
weekend.
1st.
I think the
opening, 'cause that's the
Sunday
number we were
is.
talking about.
I think the Sunday goes into
So-
that too.
That would just make any calculation we do here on this number more conservative.
Right.
Okay, so tell me then your number, Brendan, please.
So I arrived at it, and this was looking at a vehicle fee
Yep.
of $175,200. That would be for a full year.
Yep.
And the town fee would be $48,683.
Mm-hmm.
And then you total that.
Multiply that by 2/3, 0.66.
Correct, to give us the November 1st, and that would give you 148,000. And then that's assuming 24 hours of vehicle and police officer. And if we're assuming we're at 92 hours out of a possible 168, then that means it's 55% of a day. So you multiply the 148 times the 55%, and that gives you $81,400.
Yep. Okay, that's
81.
the same ballpark I ended up with.
81.
So we would take that either 81 or 82,000 and add it using Mike's approach to the 15,000.
That comes up to 97.
That's whatever's there.
97. I said 100. No,
But we really only added
96,
81.
485.
We're up
yeah.
to this total. We're
Right,
only
right.
adding
96, 485.
81 or 80, 81.4 or whatever.
Can I ask a question, because I don't know, and it has nothing to do with what we're talking about now exactly, but we get paid for an officer, and the figure was for a 24-hour day, 24/7 was $394,200. So that's what they pay the town, and then the town reimburses the officer for his time.
Because it goes through payroll.
So what percentage of that does the city end up with? Or does that all go to the officer?
20%, you said?
So it's on top of that.
But that's minus FICA.
Oh, no, I didn't, yeah, but I mean, so take me, I go and I do my detail for 8 hours, and I come home. What do I get paid, and what does the town get paid?
The hourly rate is $50 an hour, you would get $400. The town would get $480.
Oh, okay. So
Town would get 80.
Town would net 80,
Oh, gross, and then pay FICA out of that.
and then you would pay FICA out of the 80. Excuse me.
400, getting reimbursed 400 plus an 80. And then I pay FICA with 80, and I record revenue for the rest.
And it's about 13% of that.
The difference between the 20% and the.
So if we go through using Brendan's numbers, we come out with $97,085, which I get hung up on the precision of 85. So if we just use 97,000, that's probably a reasonable estimate.
I agree.
Okay.
So I'm going to make a motion that we increase the 4280 private detail police from $15,085 to $97,000.
What was the original, Cecil? Sorry.
15,085.
085. And that was 4280, right?
Yep, 4280 police, private detail police. 4280 appears more than once.
Gotcha. That's what got it. How'd you know that got me?
97.
97.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion?
I was at
He
96, 45.
said call it. We're rounding up.
Yeah.
It's not
And
going to fucking
217.
vote for it anyway, so.
We're good?
Okay. All in favor? And that's unanimous.
Unanimous?
What's that number again? 96?
97.
97.
Even. See, I call it.
All right, what's the next
I would like to move that we increase the maintenance line, page 9, item number 6648.
Point of order, you would have to vote to move to reconsider, because that's already been
Oh,
voted on.
okay, thank you. I would like to move to reconsider the vehicle parts and maintenance line, page 9, number 6648. It's the second one down. And
That would have to pass first.
pardon?
That would have to pass first, and if it passes, you can.
First
Oh,
motion
okay.
is-
So I'd like
First
to...
motion's to
okay.
reconsider.
And the second?
I'll second.
Did you vote? Yes, you voted for that.
I voted for that.
And discussion.
The motion was to reconsider the line total. Is that how you
Yes.
read it?
Okay. So all in favor of the motion to reconsider?
Point of information, I'm not remembering my Robert's rules, so I'm asking the chair whether people who did not vote for this can vote to reconsider it.
Oh.
I know I couldn't.
Oh, that's an excellent point.
I know I couldn't vote. I couldn't move to reconsider, but I don't recall
Right,
if I can vote on that.
Well, yeah, I would think so, because we should all be able to reconsider the whole docket.
I don't know.
Because if you voted, yeah, you can't.
But to
vote
be safe, I'll abstain.
Okay. So all in favor, and those would be ones, whether you did or not, but those that voted for, and is it to reconsider that one line item?
That one line item.
Okay. All in favor?
One line item.
It's just to talk about it.
Just, yeah.
This is just for discussion.
Just
Discussion,
yeah.
right. We haven't even thrown a
1,
dollar
2,
on it.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And abstain or?
Yeah, I'm abstaining.
And what about
And I'm abstaining.
abstaining? And Ruth?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you.
Discussion.
So can we discuss?
Mm-hmm.
So in discussing, I guess my question to the body is how many cars does the 13,500 affect? And do we need to just add in like 500 or 2,000?
Well, he had said that we don't need another vehicle, and in fact, the ability to use one of the older vehicles.
But I take maintenance to be tires, oil change.
There's a separate line item for tires.
There is a separate, there's separate for tires.
My comment on this would be that this account got so high with the vehicle fees from details that they were able to purchase a vehicle this fiscal that we're in with that account. I'm comfortable with 13.5.
My other thing is just to bring up the point that unlike regular details, this car would be parked and off. So how much more it's going to drive from the police station to the casino and get shut off. It's not like a Verizon or a National Grid where it's running, the heat's running. It's the car's parked.
Would
So
would the police officer be inside the car or inside?
it's my understanding that they'll be inside the building, and from when I have been in casinos, they are in the building.
Okay.
I would assume that it's going to be similar again to Newport or Lincoln. They have their own security system with their own or security guards with their own vehicles that go through the parking lot. I would believe that they would be there to assist, but this isn't. I understand why you brought it up, but this car's parked.
They're not in the car on a cold day running the engine.
It's not running the gas. It's not running
The lights
the
and all
engine.
that.
The lights. It's gonna. The car's
And
actually
they're
gonna get
not.
less.
It's not
wear
a
and
far
tear.
drive.
Right.
from
So they're
the
probably
police. Okay.
4 miles a car.
Jennifer, was the gist of your argument that we need to increase this because we're using the vehicle to go back and forth to the casino?
And that it would be idling.
They claim, yeah, okay, they claim it's
So,
not, but they're gonna
so
have
I was
dedicated
thinking if
vehicle
it's
that's
idling, if there's someone in the car
And I-
keeping warm outside, that there would need to be some maintenance on it.
I think that the officers would be inside, because,
The building.
like she said, there's security that's roaming the parking lot.
Okay.
Like if you go to the mall, right, you never see the Providence police sitting outside. They're inside the mall, but yet you have security for the mall, you know, going around out, and they have their little thing with the little lights on, and they're
And
driving
they don't
around.
leave the cars on with the keys in.
Well, hopefully.
Already.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Then, I don't have any proposal
only if there's a prisoner on the
further. Thank you for discussing.
So we just withdraw the motion? Is that what we did?
Well,
Nothing.
I asked to talk about it, we
Okay,
did.
so it just ends.
And no vote to change it.
No
right?
vote.
Okay. So I think as we continue, is that we had a rough estimate on the lodging. Excuse me, hotel tax, right?
Can you indicate,
Oh, page 3, 4905.
thank you.
Almost at the bottom. Yeah.
Key there is what kind of occupancy rate. The 181 days, that's counted out.
And it takes
Or-
summer
or
into
if you
account.
don't count more than 6 months. Whether you use more than $100, there's several variables.
Well, it's always going to change too. If you're in the winter months, it's going to be much lower. It might be lower than $100. But if you take the summer into account and the overflow from Newport, there's nothing up here. Like, I mean, I work in Newport, or Middletown, in that market. We have dates right now that I'm sending people to Westport, and you only have 2 options. You have White's, and then it's Seekonk from there. You have to take in so I think the number that you had was conservative because it may be lower in the winter, but it's going to be a lot higher in the summer, I think.
Wait, I thought there was one in Taunton, someplace in Massachusetts.
Yeah, it depends on how far you're going to send somebody from where their
Taunton's
destination
pretty
is. Like
far.
right now, Volvo race is coming in in the same weekend as one of the graduations. There's no rooms in town. You're
They're all
sending
booked.
Providence, Market, Warwick if you're lucky.
Right, but other people in other close areas to here will also be going to Taunton, that's all I'm saying, you know.
Well, wherever they go.
Wherever they go. I think the number that you were working with was a conservative number that was fair.
You think? I don't think my green light works, but my because we're going to be starting like it's going to be winter. Do you think that they won't be doing promotions and
They'll be,
But I mean, I'm just wondering if they're not going to do promotions and be like $50 rooms and
Even if they are, you can still average it out to when your weekend rate's going to be higher than your midweek
Right.
rate because you're always going to be higher on a weekend than on a midweek. It's going to be new. I mean, it's going to go by play. They're not just going to, they might invite some people in, but they're going to use, they are going to use the players' cards that they already have at Newport. They already have a generated base. Like right now, we run a promotion with Newport Grand where we give guests 20% off if they show their card, but they don't have any lodging. So they're gonna pool their players from who already have report their cards, and they're gonna take them up there, and then you're gonna have them in the next spot. They're not gonna, I think $100 a night with 30%, I think that's fair.
It's very conservative, right?
Very conservative.
Very conservative,
It's
not even
good.
conservative.
It's good until we, yeah, I agree. It's good until we get our feet wet and we know really what's going
I
on.
personally think it's gonna be higher than that, but I think you have to use a conservative number for the unknown portion.
Exactly.
I agree with the conservative number, but what Deb said is true. It's going to be winter. I have to take that into account. It's not like, and you said that it's going to be very busy at the beginning, but it's also going to be winter. So I'm just want to balance that. Yeah, I'm fine with the number. Yeah.
The market like that, the idea is, it's winter, is that you're gonna stay in, you're gonna game, you're gonna use their pool, you don't have to go outside once you
Okay.
get there. So, and there's a market for that. Like, we see, we're not running summer numbers where I'm at, but we see an influx of people that staycation, because the kids, especially like school vacation weeks, things like that, people come in just to use the pool. They're not doing tourism things that are not open. And we don't
Okay.
even have an on-site restaurant. So the idea that it's winter and that you can be contained in this facility is a perk, not necessarily a hurt.
So can I, doing the calculations, if we all agree that one of the big variables is going to be the occupancy, and if it's put in at the very conservative at a 30% occupancy, right, given the days that were out there, that was about $7,000, right? If you brought that to say if it was a 50% occupancy, so we're doing a lot better, it brings us up to $11,000. If you say that they were 75% occupied, it's 17. So we're really talking about overall pretty small numbers in terms of that thing. So we currently have on this line item hotel tax of $1,560. If we estimate $10,000 or 15, I mean we're small change. I mean we still got the biggie to get to.
So
So it's $10,000,
Conservative.
pretty conservative, added to this. So we're saying a total of 10?
It would be a total of 11,560.
Adding 10 to the 1560, so 11,560.
what was the number you had, Brendan? That was like around 10,000. What was that occupancy rate?
If you did
50.
a 50% occupancy, you'd have $11,400.
Of 84 rooms over 181 days. Yeah, I think we'll probably get flooded like when they first open, I think.
And you also have to think of too the season. They're not opening in January. They're opening in the fall. There's still the travel. And again, if they're pulling from Newport, people are going to stay because even local
Gamble
people
all night, all day.
Exactly. Yeah.
In summertime,
And then
you're
you
going to get
find it.
people going to the Cape,
Well-
and then stopping on their way.
It's a midway point.
At a midway point. So
It's just a midway point, and again, the market up here is not big. There's nothing in Fall River. There's maybe one or two. There's Whites or Westport. You do have Taunton, and you have Rainham. There's a Hampton and Rainham, but I think that in between us and the Cape, and depending on what they do with, if they're conservative on a rate and it's affordable, people will commute back and forth. Because if you talk about June and July in Newport, you're talking about $310 at an economy-based hotel on a July weekend. So if they stay moderate, it's worth the travel time.
Think about all the families that come, especially people's in-laws. We can now put them at the hotel. They don't have to stay at our houses.
honey, I've got the perfect.
It's not the draw, but you can get the overflow.
It's all right now. You guys can gamble.
So
And the kids.
Or gambling because of that.
Yeah, great. If they do what Foxwoods is, they'll have a child care area.
So we want to make a motion.
So, does somebody want to make a motion?
Jen,
What would we-
do you have a
I'm just
motion?
trying to think.
Increasing it to 10,000, increasing that line 10,000
To 10,000?
to 11,560.
11,000. So I'll make a motion to increase that line item to 11,560.
And I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? And so unanimous. 3, 10, 7. All right. Let me.
That was hotel tax 4905.
And we're still in Jen's expertise with meal taxes.
I don't have a restaurant, so that one I'm not sure. I know it's 1.08. I know that it covers not just restaurant tax. It does include soda machines, candy, any type of sales that they have, and any shops that they have will all get hit with that 1.08.
So
Vending.
If it goes in your mouth, it's 1.08.
Huh?
And
If it goes in your mouth,
Very
it's
much,
1.08.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I know at work, our vending machines, the Coke machines, we have to count for the 1.08 even on
so
the
that
soda.
also includes alcohol, wine and beer,
I would assume
and
that
drinks.
I'm not. Yeah, 1.08 when you served alcohol.
So that's
I would
what
assume
everything-
too. I don't know if the hotel plans on having room service, but I would also think that if it does, that would include room service as well.
And so, does anyone know that the 253 is based on just current?
Current, and the
Trend line would suggest it.
Okay,
I
right.
believe the
Okay, good.
casino has planned for 3 quick service and 1 sit down, and then again I don't know about.
And then, do you have any idea of the capacity?
I don't, but I'm sure we could pick something up on their website. Full service restaurant is for express food options, which was the 3.
What was the rate you talked about?
1.08.
1.08.
What we're saying is
1.08 on food and beverage.
$253,000 is
Percent,
1%
right?
of
I'm sorry?
$253,000 then is 1% of what
Think
we do
about-
in this town?
Think about what the boathouse brings in. The boathouse, just the boathouse. That's
Jesus. That's
Uh-huh.
like
So we have,
and also
It's a
too,
lot
but
of
too, you know what,
food
Mr.
going
Edwards, to
down.
take into, that's not just restaurant, take into account the alcohol, the bars in town.
Like the,
it must have
the
a bunch
liquor
of outlets.
stores?
so we have 37.
No, that's different. I think that just gets, I don't think liquor stores are hit by the 1 point, well, maybe, no, I
And,
think
but
it's service.
it's also like Tom's Market,
The
prepared
prepared, yeah.
foods.
So we have 37-ish restaurants in town.
What's a total? It would be $23 million. 253,000 is
So if we added
1.08% of
God, I never would've
23 million.
and
Sorry?
That's why we wait so long on Friday nights for a seat, because they're doing a lot of business.
so there are a few restaurants in town that are open as many hours. So you said there are 5 places to eat here?
From what I saw, it was 3 quick service and 1 sit down.
One sit down. 4.
And like I said, I don't know if the hotel plans on room service, because that would be another generator.
So 4. Well, if you said you had
Because the other thing to take into account is it's a casino, the alcohol.
so say
You really gotta
so
count
you
the
have,
alcohol
you
more
have
than the
four more, so it gives you about 10%. That's about 10% more restaurants.
Mhm.
And it's not quite 10. So if you increased that number by 10%, or I guess.
Yeah, more or
Right.
less.
Then that's 10% of the Tom's Market and Cumbies, right? Or you have to be careful of that. I mean,
They're gonna.
But I think the
Been a
alcohol
casino, once
consumption, the
they're
amount of money
really-
you're going to make out of, first off, you're going to pay more for alcohol in a casino than you would in a restaurant. Because again, and to eat, because that all goes into the player card equation. Typically, when you look at things, when you go to a casino, they're way more than what market value is, because they take into account that you're going to use the points from your card. So something that may cost, just for an example, $10 in a market outside of the casino is probably marked up for $20 because they bet on their players using their points.
I just feel this one's such a stab. This one's, I know what a hotel room is and how many rooms there are, but what they're going to do in terms of food and alcohol.
Is there a way to look at currently what they're doing in Lincoln or Newport? Where do we get that info?
That portal thing?
Yeah. Do you have information there?
I don't think it breaks it out in the level of detail we would need. Well, no, the lottery is easy because that's lottery gambling money from the lottery, but I don't think they break out food beverage tax for Twin River versus the
I
rest
still
of any
think
restaurants.
like 25 would be a conservative number, very conservative number, just because of the amount of alcohol.
So if hang on one second.
Well, on average, I think we get 4,500 on average from. Oh no, let's see.
Here's if you assumed a revenue, a yearly revenue of $3.5 million, and you said we're prorating, they're only open 8 out of the 12 months, so that's by 2/3 times that 1.08, that gives you $25,000. So it would be estimating an annual revenue for food and beverage of $3.5 million. And then prorating it would get us to the 25,000. Anyway, that's proving out what you are. I mean, to me, like kind of looking at some of these things that we're doing, if a hotel tax or that line item now is 11.5, something like that, I'd be more inclined to be very close to that. I think we need to move on to, thinking about the bigger one. I think we're putting some science to stuff that this one I feel is just a real wild.
If it makes you feel better, RI.gov, this is very fresh. Local meal beverage tax collection is 11.4% ahead of fiscal 17.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, what town was that?
It's
State.
just general state of Ireland.
Oh, okay.
Providence is up $500,000. Newport's up 189,000.
Do you want to add 10,000 to it?
Right.
Okay, I move that we add $10,000 to the meals and beverage tax.
So that would bring that number. Okay, do I have a second?
263,635.
So that's going to bring us to 263,635.
Correct. Any discussion?
Could you say that number one more time?
263,635.
All right. All in favor? And so that vote is 9-0. 9-1. Assume that Mike abstains. You just abstained, unless you wanted to.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
What did I abstain from?
So we took the, for the meals and beverage tax, we voted to add $10,000 to the number, so the new comes out to 263,635.
4906. And what was
Correct.
what was the vote?
It was 9-1.
901.
Correct. All right. So therefore then, last but not least would be is the gaming revenue item.
Well, can we address the general fund first?
Right now, it's 75,000 overall.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
The town council is proposing that there's a withdrawal from the general fund.
Oh, yes, okay. And I would like to propose we raise it to 416,000.
Just for discussion purposes, I'll second that motion.
I don't know. I'll go back. Okay, we have a motion and seconded. So we're on the very bottom. There's no account number. Withdrawal from the general fund is to increase that number to total $416,000. So Jennifer motion and Cecil seconded.
So now, with the approach be that if we took that 416, which will bring us right down to the 3% cap, would we also be looking at gaming revenue?
Well, we can address that next, but so far we've increased the budget numbers by about 105,000, and then this would increase it by another 416, and I think this is money that the 416 we can count on because it's there, and we should count what we know we have
Yeah, well,
before we gamble on what we don't, and then we can.
I think we should talk about casino revenue before we talk about defaulting to the general fund, because the potential is to vote that money in and then go to the next line item, which is also include the casino money. So you can end up including both. It's not one necessarily or the other. So I think we should talk about casino money first and then come back to whether we want to allocate anything from the general fund, because you have the potential of doing both.
yeah, and the 416, we've already got 75, so it's not a pure 416 increase.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it would to bring it up to 416.
Right.
That the 416 number would be minus 75,000?
The amount to increase would be.
So 406.
341.
So 416 is total.
416 what? Did you
It
say
would the
416
so the total amount would be 416,000.
Correct. Correct. It's an increase of.
And to increase it up, increase it to 416,000.
Right.
Which is $341,000 more than the 75 that the town council recommended.
Okay. So there's a motion and seconded discussion. I don't know whether it matters. Which,
Well, we
it
have to
could.
vote on this now or amend it. We have to discuss and because it's there, it's out there.
So the motion was made and seconded.
Right? We're in the discussion phase. People are ready to.
I don't have any smart. I'm not smart enough to make a comment. So if someone that's smarter than me can start, and so smart people start talking.
And there's
dead silent.
So if you're the next person to speak, you're smart. Here comes
What do you want to talk about?
I'll speak
Here he
up.
comes.
I'm having a little bit of trouble thinking in terms of taking from the general fund without having some calibration of the casino revenue. As our target, where I think we have a pretty good idea that we want to give some tax relief, but we don't want to go so far as to make it very difficult if things don't work out. But I don't know whether, I'm comfortable with the 416, raising the 416, because as it's been already said, that's there pretty well. Now then, we've got another few thousand that we've added along the way, but do we then want to go and say, all right, we want to take some of the casino gaming and put that in? And I'm a little, I'm not sure how to
I think we
jump
have
to
to be really careful on what else we add, because we have, all the departments have anteed up, cut their budgets to a bare minimum, and to turn around and to all these departments that have made large sacrifices and give a huge tax cut to, or a large tax cut to the citizens is a disingenuous approach to all the departments that have been spoken to and asked time and again to bring their budget down as far as they can. So I think this way it's money that we know we have, and it gives us a significant relief. It's not as much as we'll be able to realize once the casino comes in and we really see all what those actual revenues are that we actually don't know yet. And then that will be dealt with fresh with the charter, and then again next year.
I would. I guess it depends how people are thinking of this. I'd almost rather see. I'm not. If the goal is to pick a number that seems like it'll be covered reasonably likely by casino revenue, it seems to me that the clearer strategy would be to estimate the casino revenue and then not increase the general fund if that were the objective. Just as an aside, I want to object as a matter of political philosophy to the notion that implied that taxpayers are somehow here in service of the departments. I think it goes the other way, but that's just an aside. My preference, if I had to pick one and you were going to go with a number, I'd say estimate the casino revenue, and then just because the general revenue fund is just the catch-all. So, we're estimating all kinds of activity that presumes the casino is operational. So to leave that line
but
zero.
one is an estimate and the other isn't.
Well,
416 is actual, and any income coming in is pie in the sky.
So
Right, but we've already estimated this thing's going to be open November 1st, or a whole bunch of.
I think we had some people come in and give us some supporting information that we're not just pie in the sky and a number. I think that we should leave the general fund money where it is for a catch-fall in case we are a little bit wrong. I understand what you're saying about that the budget, all these department heads were asked to keep their budget at a fair minimum. I don't think it was fair that there was no analogy as to this money was going to be generated this year, and I am not comfortable that it was not included in this document, some number that should have been. I understand that they look at historical data, but we knew something was coming in, and they did not factor for any of that. But they did go to department heads and say, cut your budget as much as you can. But they knew that this was going to come in at some dollar amount. In addition, I think you do have to take the taxpayer into consideration. That's what we are tasked to do. We're in a reevaluation year. And I think we should come out with the fairest tax rate that we possibly can, taking all things into account.
One of the ways I look at that, whatever number we managed to plug in anticipated, because gaming, to stay on the same page, gaming revenue. One of the ways I look at that, though, between this year and next, when we have a better picture, is more of a bridge. So whether or not down the road things change and that money that's plugged in now stays there and gets added to, as far as the department heads, I mean, I agree with Jen. I could feel some of their pain, but on the same note, we should probably have a better financial footing next year. And if any of those needs come back to the table, then they should definitely get looked at then. So,
Yeah, I would like to say, and I agree with Dave, and that one more year, it's this year, it's an unsure, it's a less of a sure year. It's an sure year that you could keep their budgets to a minimum. That was reasonable. That seems reasonable to me. And next year, you can be more sure.
Yeah. I'd like to add
What?
to that. So piggyback Ruth, piggyback Dave, piggyback
I wasn't
Jen.
quite done, though. Just one more thing.
Oh.
They're also on what Jen Rashley said. I believe that they got salary. A lot of people got salary increases last year, this year. So I don't really feel that there's hardship going on for these departments. I think we did keep it as much of a minimum as we could, and still be okay. And then next year, as David said, I agree, it will be less of it'll be more sure that we can also expand those budgets, do what is necessary, that people have waited on. So, Michael, go ahead, sorry.
That's
All
all right.
done.
I'll twist your words a little bit, Ruth. So I initially said piggyback you, but now I'm not piggybacking. So I'm going to twist it a little bit, and I think what you're saying is, and this is how I feel, is that I don't think this committee cut anything that was asked from the town council. So, for instance, the fire department said this is what we need to operate this year after they met with the town council, and they brought it to us and the police department and everything else. So we didn't cut. We didn't create any pain. This is, what's that?
So there was a slight increase.
There was a slight increase, which we gave, so what was it, 3.7% or whatever it was. So we didn't cut anyone. I know last year there was some cut. We added the plow trucks in that kind of came in after. This is a bridge year. It is a reevaluation year. So taxpayers right now are, I think, probably concerned, mad, steamed, whatever you want to say. Some are pleased, I'm sure.
What kind of number are people thinking about?
I don't think we should be at the full, I'm sorry.
Taking from the general fund, you mean?
No,
No,
casino.
No,
like,
casino
what
money.
kind of-
What were, I'm sorry, Justin, what was
Je-
the number, 984?
948,
948,
583.
583. Yeah.
984. I think maybe we look to reduce that a little bit to
Fine.
come to, I don't know, maybe 700.
And,
Because that's
and
the 400 that we have in the general fund doesn't create this huge deficit that we're all going to get tax bills if it shortfalls. I mean, I'm thinking more towards the probability that it might be a little bit closer to the 9, and then you know what? Then we're good.
So here's what I'm thinking, is that if we have many families in our town who are going to see, who have had property tax values rise, and that's going to be a big challenge. That the other thing that will be a big challenge is the other regular expenses at home, like internet and computer technology. And if with that being the case, I would add money to the library to bring back the half position that they lost, because last year they asked for $75,000 more that they didn't get, and this year they asked for $125,000 more than the town council offered. And it's the first institution people go to when they can't afford a new computer and they can't afford their internet, and it's the place they have to go to apply for a job. And besides being a place where the more that the library is open and there's staff to assist people to augment their ability to use the library, that we need to instate that number there. When they didn't even bother to talk about, they didn't even come to tell us that they lost the position. I had to ask. And they were so pushed back by the town council to not bring a number forward. So in the balance of all things, I think that's worth considering bringing that up.
Jennifer, this is, again, we've already said that this is a transition year and that they'll be better off next year. So why are you bringing this up?
I'm bringing it
To
up.
increase this transition year.
Yeah, I'm bringing
I don't
it
understand.
up because all the departments were spoken to as if this money did not exist at all. And so we're talking about maybe changing the revenue count by $800,000 when we $800 to $900 when we factor in all the adjustments we just made.
I first off, let me just say that I'm a supporter of the library. I use the library. I don't have a problem with the library. I want to go on record with that. However, the problem that I have with this particular conversation is I understand they were spoken to, but they did come in and ask for level funding, and that's what we agreed to do for this year. I think it's very difficult to go, well, okay, we're going to give it to the library, but we're not going to give the fire chief what he wanted. And where do you pick in school? And or the school department didn't get any more either. So you're really kind of picking one. Just let me finish. I think that it's very difficult to just pick one particular thing, and I wish they were getting more money, but the thing is we have already voted to level fund them, and that I do think we need to look at the tax rate for the people that are here. And the other thing is by bringing our tax rate down, we do then are more comparable to the towns that are neighboring us when you look, because our tax percentage is high, comparable to the other towns, and it puts us in a closer proximity to neighboring towns, and it gives the relief to the taxpayer for this year. And then we can look and go, okay, now we have all of the money generated next year. What good things can we do for that? But I don't think it's put it in this pile to take it from that pile. And I would love to see more money go to schools. I would love to see more monies go to the library. I would love to get the fire truck, the fire and rescue for the fire chief. But it's not materializing this particular year. I think this year we have to look at the taxpayer.
But different is that the school has a fund balance, and that they can reach into to steady the course, and the other departments haven't downsized, whereas the library let people go.
When we talked about things, I mean, we had a conversation 2 weeks ago about 2006 fire rescue wagon, still be it on backup, but it's a 2006. I mean, I think if we were going to look, if we'd have to go back to this whole thing and prioritize what's a priority. Is the computer at the library or the rescue or a ladder truck?
But I think it goes back to if people are income pressed because of their house value going up, that the first line of defense is make sure your library is open so everybody has a place to go to apply for a job. Because we live in a day and age where once you can't afford the next new technology and you can't afford your computer service, that the library is the place where you go, where you look up the job, you apply for the job.
Okay, Jennifer, you keep on bringing this up time after time, and I do have to make one point. From what I've seen, from what I've observed, when people lose their jobs or when they have hard times, one of the last things that they will ever think about getting rid of is one of these, a smartphone. They all have them. I don't have one. but all of you do. And what can you, let me finish. What can you access with a smartphone? Almost anything. So to say that they do not have access to the internet and that they don't have access to a computer is simply not true. Plus, if they have kids in school, all those kids seem to have computers that they bring home. So there's another one. Now, as far as the tax rate goes, we have reduced the tax rate this year by a significant amount. The only thing that's made it go up is reevaluation, and that was going to happen anyway. Now, none of us like how much it went up. A lot of us don't like where it went up, but it's a fact, and it's not going to change. Giving more money to the library would be a wonderful thing, but keep in mind, every dime you give them today snowballs. It's called maintenance of effort. You give them a little this year, and it never goes away. Is that a bad thing? No. But we've already discussed and been asked by the library to give them a certain amount we have. So, now as other people have brought up a lot of times, the FDR approves a budget. The very next day, the town council can do whatever they want with it. And they do. They frequently transfer money around.
Yep,
They have been known to give money to the library after the FDR. It happens.
And I have, love to move this, keep going forward, and what I'd like to do is let's just go in order and allow each person to say his or her piece.
The motion on the table is,
We're still having discussion, and we keep going back and forth and people interrupting each other. Hey, Dave, do you have anything?
Not to completely add to it, I mean, we could split hairs as to what we feel about library services. I agree with Jen. I'm 1,000% in support of the library. I see a ton of people there using the computers for stuff like that, but that's splitting hairs. One thing I did catch this budget year was there's a little bit of an internal rift going on over there, and that there was some financial issues that they're trying to square away, which was one of the reasons why they had asked for the level funding this year as well. I believe when they came in front of us, there was a significant salary increase, but yet their budget didn't go up. That was a document that we all got here, so I believe they're working on that. It was told to us that they're working on their internal stuff, and next year's a different story. So,
Jen, did you have any? Deb?
Am I on? So, and I am a strong library supporter also, but we don't vote on their line items. We vote on a total library budget, so they can maneuver however they want to pay for whatever they feel is priority. And I think in town this year, I think we'd all would have loved to give everybody everything they wanted, but I think a lot of the priority this year had to go to everything that was contracted that we had to pay contractually, and we were in dire straits for capital equipment. We had plows that were falling apart. We had lots of DPW issues, and we really needed to put money there, and that needed to be our priority this year. So I would love to give more money to the library, but I think that we needed, if you have a choice between adding computers to the library or plowing our streets, sanding our streets, I think that's where we needed to prioritize this year. Just my opinion.
Cecil?
Speaking to the motion, my preference is to leave the withdrawal from the general fund at the 75,000, and then moving to the casino gaming revenue. If we take the same conservative approach we've done on the other things, back down the 948,000 estimate to a 6-month estimate, that's $786,000, $786,840. With the 75,000 town council withdrawal, the general fund excess would still be 341,000, and we would really reduce that 786 by the 341, there would be a little bit of a pad there. So we would, in essence, be, under my thinking, which is nothing magic about it, it's just one approach, we would be doing about a $400 and some odd thousand casino revenue line item, leaving the 75,000 alone. And I don't have my arithmetic done, but that's generally where I'm at. Thank you.
So I'll say this, Jen, I give you a lot of credit. You're obviously very passionate about the library, and I echo what other people have said too. My kids are in there all the time, and I'm happy they have a library. With that being said, I think Deb made a good point that they control their own budget for the most part internally of how it's spent, line items and everything like that. This is my first go around with the budget committee. So I just wanted to say that they asked for the dollar. We didn't dictate. I'm a budget committee. We didn't dictate to them. It was like a trial that never happened. I came to budget committee meetings last year. I know that was a bone of contention, the library back and forth. It got a little, I don't want to say ugly, but contentious, I would suppose. But this year, when they said they want $1, I'll just be honest with you, I was very relieved because I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm this elephant in the room sort of thing. When they said $1 and the school said $1, I was like, wow, this is going to be great. So with that being said, they got what they asked for, and I know what you're saying. There's money coming in now. They didn't know it was there. But it's a transitional year, and hopefully next year, everyone will have that opportunity to put in for what they want, and the budget committee can listen to their needs and appropriate the money accordingly to what's being asked. So for transition, like Jen said, with the tax rate fluctuating, some people feel a little bit of the pain. My whole thing still would to be to lower the tax rate for the people, and then next year, all the departments have a fair say in how they're going to get a piece of the casino money. This is just a transitional year.
Ruth?
Yeah, I think I spoke before, so I'm all set on that. Priorities of this, the transitional year versus the coming years for the taxpayers, and that's what we're here for. And I wanted to mention also, I know that I've seen people buy a used computer for a new one for 100 and a used one for maybe 50. So I'm just saying, I'm just mentioning that that's just not a high cost anymore for some of the technology. It's going down and down. So I just wanted to mention that as an aside. I'm all set.
Justin?
More than the technology is the internet service. That fee is a lot. And the other thing is that the library is different than every other department in the town in that they have to pay for all of their healthcare expenses. And as those rise, nothing in their budget goes up to balance that rise. And they've seen it's their budget is treated differently, and they don't have any reserves. So that's my opinion.
So I guess I haven't invoked it yet, but I get to do. I learned from Cecil to get to be the chair, getting to speak last. But I think this is an interesting budget where we had to spend a lot of time without knowing what, not thinking about. Not shame on us, but kind of naive of us that we didn't think about revenue and a lot of the expense decisions that we had. And in particular, thinking about the casino revenue. So we're faced with a town council that, in their utmost conservatism, said, we're not going to put any money in. And I think as a budget committee, our guesses, and we just spent a fair amount, a couple of hours here tonight, is trying to do our best effort to figure out what that revenue is going to be. And I'm guessing from the will of the committee is to use some portion of that revenue to help lower the tax rate and to leave a budget that for many of us feel is pretty tight, but is a doable budget. So I have, there's a motion and a second that's out there that would increase the withdrawal from the general fund. Currently, it's at 75,000 to bring that up to the 416. There was discussion that was out there. Cecil had mentioned, and it's certainly not yet voted on, but is to make some estimate of casino revenue and not assume the drawing down the fund balance. And as I look at that, it's really it's saying what might be at risk if this money doesn't come in. So if you take Cecil's analogy and you said if there was 786,000